Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐴 on Wattpad. Now let's start. The relation to be found in BLD is unmistakable. He was in every sense their biological equal. Yet his differences could not be glossed over. Neither blonde nor green-haired, his eyes missing the radiant sparkle of emerald or blue. But he was their son, her brother. So why was he different? Jet black hair, onyx-colored eyes. Even his personality failed to be as bright as his family. A black sheep. That is what he was. Early morning rays of sunlight shined through the glass pane of his bedroom window. Light shined on his small face, forcing his eyes to open. Sleep still in his body as the boy forced himself to sit, eyes half-lidded as trying to adjust. A yawn leaking from his mouth. His small body stretching while his mind slowly caught up with reality. Today was his 4th birthday. His chest quickly warmed, wanting to squirm with excitement for the day to progress. A quirk assessment. His hopes of awakening his quirk, of being a hero, were almost here. Throwing the covers from his body, he swung his legs, quickly hopping off the soft mattress and onto the carpet floor below. Eyes sweeping over his room. Like every 4-year-old boy in this age, his room was covered with hero posters. Heroes like All Might, Magnetic, and Endeavor were seen from wall to wall, while the floor was littered with action figures of those very same heroes. The young boy's mind was not focused on any of these, however. Instead, he made his way to his bedroom door, opening it slowly. Before he walked down the hall to the neighboring door. Opening the door slowly as to not wake anyone residing in the room up, he crept inside. He spotted a bed the same size as his, on top a lump covered by what looked like 3 blankets. Walking to the bed, the boy avoided the toys that littered the ground before stopping at the small figure. Grabbing the end side of the large blanket cocoon, the boy pulled the covers off, showing a young girl his age. Her mouth agape, drool spilling out the side, covering her pillow and parts of her green blonde highlighted hair with saliva. Somehow her body was arranged in the oddest sleeping form imaginable, her right knee touching her chin while her left leg was fully extended. Her arms were thrown about, one under her pillow and the other covering her head. Hee. Izuku stifled his chuckle, wanting to burst out laughing at his sister Izumi. Leaning down, he whispered, hand shaking her shoulder. Izumi, wake up. The quirk test is today. Small girl groaned and mumbled, a hand falling to wipe her mouth. Again he repeated his words, only to groan in pain as Izumi's head shot upward and into his chin. Looking around, Izumi spotted her twin brother with her emerald green eyes before her 4-year-old mind registered what her brother had said. Izuku, the quirk test is today, we gotta wake up and Dad. Jumping off the bed, Izumi leaped over the downed Izuku, leaving the boy to rub his chin to soothe the pain before following after her. Catching up to his running sister, he watched from the now open door of his parents' bedroom to see Izumi jump in the air. Her balled fists unintentionally aiming for the stomachs of their mom and dad. The pair woke up with a groan, their Mother Inko being the first to spot the one responsible. Izumi honey, please don't do that. But mom, it's the quirk test today. Today. A moment of understanding crossed Inko's face. The woman nodding, her eyes falling to Izuku in the doorway. Still Izumi. I guess you're just excited. Alright, well, mommy needs to get dressed and you two need to ready to have breakfast. Picking up the young girl, Inko gently placed her on the floor. Izumi, let's wait for mom. Walking into the room, Izuku took the girl lightly by the hand, leading her out the door and closing it behind him. Going to the stairs, Izuku's hand left Izumi's as he began walking. Izumi, on the other hand, jumped onto the railing, sliding down. Once they reached the last step, Izumi, with a sparkle in her eyes, turned towards Izuku yelling, Izuku, what do you think our quirks will be? I want mine to be as awesome as All Might's so I can be the #1 hero, and you can be the #2 hero. Pointing at her brother, Izumi saw Izuku turn to her before answering. I'm gonna be the #1 hero. Something about Izumi claiming him to be second irked the boy. I'll get a cooler quirk than All Might and you'll be second. Nope. I'll be first. The back and forth continued for a while. Both children claiming they'll be number one. The competition forming between them growing with each second until Inko's presence was made known. Her hands grabbing their ears with a pinch. Get along you two. You'll both be great heroes but not like this. You don't want me to call All Might and tell him you're misbehaving, would you? No. Both kids lowered their head, ears being released from their painful hold. Okay then. Now go sit down and wait while I get breakfast started. Doing as they were told, they started walking towards the living room couch. Only to stop as another interruption hoisted them from the floor and pulled them into a hug. Laughing, the twins' father Toshionori Yagi squeezed the pair in his broad arms. The man stood easily over 6 feet 4 inches, his body muscular and strong, smile wide. This wasn't even his all-might form. My little rascals. You both excited to get your quirks today? His question was met with 2 responses. Izumi kicked her legs, arms shooting up into the air. I'm gonna get the strongest quirk ever. Izuku on the other hand nodded, a smile on his face as he returned the hug of his father. Despite the boy's differences in comparison to his family, neither his parents or sister hated him for it. Toshionori's smile growing wider as he set them down. His large hands rustling their hair. Of course, having opened the can of worms that was quirks with Izumi, Toshionori was bombarded with her hopes and dreams which he was always listening to. While Izuku's inputs varied here and there, it was unmistakable to the number one hero himself that his 2 children's drive to be heroes was just like his own. Time passed and soon the smell of a fresh breakfast permeated through the air. Toshi, breakfast is ready. Yelling from the kitchen, Inko finished making breakfast, alerting her family and watching as Izumi and Toshi ran to the table while Izuku's gentle slow strides lagged slightly behind the 2 goofball members of the family. Sitting down at the table, the family sat at their plates. Thank you for the meal. Digging into the food, the Yagis ate with vigor except for one. Izuku, taking quiet bites of his food, was met with the same feeling he had growing up. He was really different from them. Too different. After the family finished their food, the 2 kids were taken back upstairs by Inko, changing from their pajamas to actual clothing. Though the help was more directed to Izumi, who struggled putting on her own outfit and accessories. Finally, after reaching the front door, Inko looked back to her husband, the pair giving a light goodbye kiss. We'll see you after the quirk test, Toshi. Leaving the house, Inko and the Yagi twins went to their car, both kids ready to find out what heroes they were going to be and unknowingly setting up a destined future that will divide them from each other. Sitting on their seats, Izuku, Izumi and Inko awaited their call from the doctor, having done their BLD and X-rays already. As of right now, Izumi was too excited to sit down, jumping up and down in her seat while Izuku had his small nose buried in a book that was on one of the small tables in the waiting room. For a few minutes, Inko tried to calm down Izumi while Izuku was immersed in reading, though he did peek up a few times, taking in the appearance of the kids in there, some of them with their quirks already noticeably showing. Analyzing the potential of what their quirks would be, his curious mind was halted when a nurse called out, "Will the Yagi family please come to examination room 3? The doctor will see you now." Getting up, Inko picked up Izumi, being turning to Izuku, seeing him put the book down and start following her as they entered the room. Sitting down on the small overbed, the nurse looked to the small family with a smile. "Please wait here, the doctor will only be a minute." Hearing this, Izumi got even more excited, bouncing up and down while Izuku smiled, eventually until the doctor had come in carrying 2 folders. Sitting down the doctor sighed before he asked Inko a question that sealed Izuku's destiny. "Mrs. Yagi, I have good news and bad news. What would you like to hear first?" Looking Inko straight in the eyes, showing the severity of the question. Worried about her children combined with the doctor's stare, Inko answered, "The bad news, please." Fixing his glasses, the doctor looked at the members of the family before clearing his throat. "I'm afraid your son Izuku is quirkless. Through the X-ray and the BLD test we ran, it was determined that your son Izuku has no possible chance of receiving a quirk. He lacks the essential genome mutation that is found in all quirk users." Going into deeper detail, the doctor showed Inko the X-ray and the BLD test, though Izuku was in his mind thinking of the situation. "Quirkless. It was the one word no child wanted to hear. It was a death sentence. Even at this age Izuku knew this. There was no one who has heard of a quirkless hero, let alone the number of quirkless that were still around. Izuku's head fell, hands going to hold his face as tears leaked from his onyx eyes. Teeth gritting at the growing irritation he felt in them. The stinging in his eyes completely unrelated to the tears he shed. His ears failed to pick up any words beyond this, the devastation he felt overpowering everything until his mother spoke again. "Well, what's the good news, doctor?" Holding Izumi's hand, Inko looked at Izuku with sadness in her eyes. "Your daughter Izumi has developed a very powerful quirk, Mrs. Yagi. We called it telekinetic enhance. Izumi's quirk allows her to use telekinesis much like yours, however she differs due to her quirk being useful against people and herself." The doctor, reading off of the file, looked back up to Inko, whose face quickly turned from sadness to happiness, and so did Izumi's. "Did you hear that, sweetie? You can be a great hero with that quirk." Lifting Izumi into the air, Inko snuggled her daughter with Izuku looking on. Between the gaps of his fingers, his eyes captured the scene vividly. No longer were they onyx. Izuku's iris and pupils changed. The color of his eye turning a darkened red. A single ring formed around his pupil while a single tomo became visible. What he saw burned into his memories. His heart pounding in his ears as he watched his mother's happy face, Izumi's smile threatening to split her cheeks. He couldn't help but feel forgotten. His jaw tightened, a deep-seated resolve rooted in his chest. Quirkless or not, he'll be a hero. Eventually the pair calmed, and after expressing their thanks to the doctor, Inko led the pair. Izumi snuggled into her chest, lifted by her entire arm. Izuku, on the other hand, given only the hand extended behind her back. "Come on, Izumi, we have to tell your father." Leaving the hospital was a painful process, and eventually getting into the car, Izuku was silent as Inko's praises for Izumi never ended, his sister ever so often sending a smile his way. When they got home, Inko carried Izumi up to the house while Izuku tagged along behind. Slipping inside the door before Inko had closed it fully, they were greeted by Toshionori. Looking at his children, Toshionori smiled as his eyes turned to Inko. "So what were the results, honey?" Inko, looking at her husband, had a large smile on her face. "Izuku is quirkless, but Izumi has a quirk just like yours." Toshionori's eyes looked down at Izuku. Seeing the boy's tear-stricken face, he went to reach out his hand. The guilt of hearing that word forming a pit in the hero's stomach. Before anything could come from his attempt, Izumi leaped from Inko's arms, forcing Toshionori's attention onto her. "That's great, sweetie. You can be the #1 hero." With Izumi's expectant eyes placed on Toshionori, the man's intention was quickly snuffed. Izuku watched the scene, his small fists clenching as he walked towards the stairs, no longer wanting to be in the same room. Again he was reminded of a simple fact. He was different from them. Toshionori, on the other hand, pulled Inko and Izumi into a tighter hug, peppering his daughter with small kisses. He could hear it. Their celebration, their compliments, and their ideas of training. Reaching his room, Izuku climbed into his bed, knees tucking deep into his chest as he hugged them close. Fresh tears leaking from his eyes while he glared at the wall, his Sharingan never faltering as he went hungry that night. His tears had long dried when morning came. Staring at the ceiling, Izuku lay in his bed unmoving. Tired. He hadn't slept much. Hearing Izumi's birthday celebration through his bedroom door gave the boy a lot of time to think. A deep inhale through his nose invited the cold morning air to freeze his lungs. Rolling to his side, the boy forced himself out of bed. His body felt dirty. He didn't take a bath yesterday. Moving, he left his room, heading towards the upstairs bathroom. Unlike his sister, he had stopped bathing with his parents a long time ago. He was always quicker on the uptake, a point of praise that his mother and father were happy to let him know. Washing himself didn't take long. Izuku's face remained stoic. He had let out all his emotions the other night, biting his pillow in frustration, kicking against his sheets, crying. There was no more energy in his body to continue. Small hands went to rub against his still irritated eyes. Looking in the mirror, he looked bloodshot and stinging with pain. He gazed at his reflection, jumping back once his eyes changed, forming his Sharingan unknown to his current knowledge. Nearly slipping on the tile floor, he steadied himself and began to look in the mirror again, examining himself. But they said. He had heard it clearly, there was no chance of him having a quirk, so what was this? He reached to his eye, trying to ignore the growing pain and fatigue in his body. His eyes fluttered, eyelids closing, and once they opened back his eyes returned to normal. Confusion and curiosity filled his body. What's happening? Fear. He didn't understand. His chest rose with each rapid breath. Hands going to grab his wet hair, only to stop as he looked deeper into his reflection. Somehow he reigned over his emotions. Stepping back and away from the mirror, he left the bathroom. Mind torn, one half wanting to find out more, the other knowing the time didn't allow for it. School was starting soon. Returning to his room, he got dressed and for nearly an hour waited until the door to his room burst open. Izumi, still dressed in her pajamas, looked at him with a smile. Perhaps it was because she missed the opportunity to do it yesterday, but the girl pointed at Izuku. I've got a quirk and you don't. That makes me the #1 hero. Her thumb hit her chest with a proud smirk. Her words nipped at him. He got angry, turning his head. Shut up, he mumbled to himself. Her words alone stopped any thought of him showing her his changed eyes. She would just make fun of him for it. It frustrated him. Walking up to him, Izumi prodded the boy with her finger. I got a quirk. You can't be a hero. She chanted over and over again, pushing her finger into his shoulder. Each time only making Izuku more and more angry. I'll still be a hero. Get out. He screamed back and into Izumi's face. The girl stepped back, about to retort. No, you sit dash. Izumi. Breakfast is ready. You don't want to be late. Inko's words stopped Izumi's outburst, the girl looking to Izuku before sticking her tongue out at him. She ran out the door, not bothering to close it as she left. Izuku sat there. It wasn't lost on him that his mom only called for Izumi. Putting his head down, the boy was about to stew in his own pity when a knock on the door got his attention. Toshionori stood in the doorway, his smile never fading as he walked closer to Izuku before sitting next to the boy. With a hand, the man rustled Izuku's head. Don't worry, my boy. Izumi's just excited. His father's hand felt nice. At least anyone was paying attention. I know it's hard, Izuku. Finding out you're quirkless. I know what it's like to feel powerless, my boy, but you can't give up. Toshionori's hand fell, pulling Izuku into a side hug. You have the heart of a hero. As long as you have that, then having a quirk is secondary. Finally, Toshionori saw Izuku look up and towards him. If you promise to keep that heart of a hero, I'm sure one day everyone will see that you can be a hero. Do you promise? Toshionori's left pinky extended, prompting Izuku's to follow. Again, Izuku's Sharingan had activated, watching his finger coil around Toshionori's. It was a promise. Good. Rubbing his shoulder, Toshionori spoke again. Now come on. Let's go have some breakfast, you have school today. It was his father's words that spurred Izuku up and off the bed, following the blond man with his hand gripped onto his breathes. Finally, the hunger he felt since yesterday satiated. When the school came into view, the anxiousness invading Izuku became overpowering. What would all the rest of the kids say when they found out he was quirkless? That uncertainty ate away at Izuku's mind. Getting dropped off only increased the pit feeling in his stomach. Izumi, on the other hand, held no reservations, her body blasting forward as she ran to their friends, the Bakugo and Todoroki twins. Izuku's feet, however, hesitated to move. He too wanted to go and play with them just like always, but his body stayed rooted in its position, only responding when he instead opted to retreat to a nearby tree next to the playground. He sat against the trunk, back placed firmly against it in search of support. In his mind there were no clues as to what his sister was doing as she and the others glanced in his direction. When she had spotted the two pairs of twins, Izumi ran to them, the smile on her face growing when she neared closer and closer. Her eyes especially drawn to the sisters of the twins, Shochan, Kaken. Her arms captured both the spiky ash blonde and dual hair-colored sisters in a hug. Her hug returned with their own. Pulling away, she gave a wave to the brothers of the pair. Katsumi and Katsuki, a pair of explosively aggressive, ash-blonde twins, and the Todoroki twins, dual-quirked, subdued pair. Both were longtime family friends, their parents knowing each other for years. So it was only natural they did as well. Katsumi and Shoya looked around the playground and Izumi noticing the lack of a certain someone. Shoya's small shy voice being the one to raise the question. Hey, Izumi, where is 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫? Izumi tilted her head before looking through the playground. She hadn't noticed where he had gone. Eventually she spotted him. Oh, by the tree. Do we go there? Katsumi asked, looking at Izuku over Izumi's shoulder. He's quirkless. Izumi spoke loudly, the few kids around her also hearing her words. Though her exclamation caught the group off guard. 𝐻𝐿 is quirkless. Yep. We had our quirk test and the doctor said he won't ever get a quirk. No sympathy could be found in Izumi's honest words. But what about him being a hero? Shoto spoke from the side. There's no quirkless heroes. Katsuki shouted from the side, smashing one fist into the other with a small explosion. He'll get beat up super fast. No way is he gonna be one. But maybe. Katsumi tried to protest but it fell on deaf ears. He said he still wants to be a hero. Izumi sneered uncharacteristically for a 4-year-old. I have a quirk but he told me he's gonna be the #1 hero. Her fists shook, angry at her brother. Always when they grew up she was compared to him. Izuku was mature, he was smart. But now he's quirkless. He's worse than her. There's no way he's gonna be a better hero than me. She stomped her foot, her apparent anger at the situation noticed by the group and particularly in the case of the two boys. It was an immature crush on Izumi, but they didn't like that Izuku was making Izumi feel this way. Their little minds coming up with a way to make Izumi happy, for her to like them more. My dad told me quirkless people actually become villains. It was a lie formed in Todoroki's mouth. His dad was Endeavor, so there was no way any of the kids would doubt what Shoto said. He said that because they can't be heroes they get mad and do evil stuff. Izuku will be a villain if he tries to be a hero. A villain? Katsuki shouted, his teeth grinding against each other. We can't let him become a villain. We're gonna be heroes, we can't have him do bad stuff. Let's beat him up so he doesn't even try becoming a hero. The values of heroes were so ingrained into their minds. What was the harm in getting rid of a potential villain early? None could come up with a reason to say no. 3/5 of the group didn't want to say no, and even the hesitant sisters eventually caved in. The strain on his eyes and the fatigue in his body increased each time he blinked. Izuku's Sharingan activating and deactivating by his will. Head placed onto his knees as his hands absent-mindedly played with the grass below, ripping out blades of green and rolling them between his fingers. His head swimming with the words of his father, his promise to keep being a hero. It made his lips groan with a small smile. Izumi. His mom. They both just forgot about him. Huh. A sigh erupted for the umpteenth time. He tried desperately to plan out what he was going to do in order to become a hero, with moments of concentration broken by the curiosity toward his eyes. With the strain disappearing he sat. His era of silence broken by the looming shadows that blocked the sun from his head. Hey! Izumi yelled, forcing Izuku to look up at her. Her face written with anger, the two pairs of twins beside her mostly matching her same expression. Izumi, do you still want to be a hero? Why dash? The word had barely left his mouth by the time an explosion-propelled fist hit his face. Knocking to the floor, Izuku felt his throbbing cheek as the group towered over him. You quirkless Deku. You won't ever be a hero. Katsuki screamed in the boy's face. After the first hit, the rest followed soon after. Kicks, punches, quirks, they became ingrained into his memory as he covered his head with both of his arms. Their words would never be lost on him. You can never be a hero, you quirkless trash. Useless, he didn't have enough energy to fight back. Instead he lay there taking the hits as they came, his eyes capturing each and every single movement they made. Time seemed to slow down as they trampled on him. He could see how they moved, what was moving. Yet despite all this he was stuck in the very same spot by the time they finished. Power. They had it. He didn't. That was the truth. When it had happened. Who knows? The tomo that encircled his eyes grew by one. Not that it really mattered. He could copy and see what they were going to do, but even then it amounted to futile bouts of resistance. He fought back regularly, trained himself day in and day out, yet nothing came of it. He lacked what most would want, teaching. That first day had been a prelude to what was to come. Now at 14 years old, nothing has changed for the better. Toshionori had stopped paying attention years ago. Inko even longer than that. Izumi and her friends ridiculed, spit on, humiliated, and hit him. The aggressiveness only grew as the years dragged on, escalating beyond normal means. His back covered in scars as their quirk experimentation progressed. Shoya and Katsumi, they devolved, no better than their brothers. No longer did they hold looks of regret when they pushed him down, but they actively enjoyed it. They searched his face for emotion each time they began their attacks. If he showed joy, they turned it into sorrow, anger into pain. He wouldn't give them that advantage anymore. Now that this was the last day of middle school, he would be able to escape the daily beatings at least for a summer. No doubt his aggressors would be placed in the U. A prep high school, though that was a place he too was striving for. The kids had kissed the right buttes growing up. Izuku had quickly found out who his parents were by the time he was it was on Izumi's 7th birthday they revealed their identities, all while forgetting how thin the walls of the house really were. It hurt at the time, but now. Izuku shook his head, readjusting his position on his desk chair. His uniform was in tatters, sewn haphazardly by his own hand. His jet-black spiked hair long enough to fall just between his shoulder blades. He had at one point cut it regularly, but this too was abandoned. His handsome face remaining stoic. With the Sharingan activated, he captured today's graffiti that painted his desk. The death threats were numerous, and so were the exclamations in the mistake of his BR. He almost found it laughable. The students in his class all ganged up on him, even though many, if not all of them, wouldn't ever come close to breaking even the thinnest barrier in their path of becoming a hero. Finger tapping on his desk, he could feel the glares stabbing into the side of his head. It was more of an obsession at this point. No matter what the day held, somehow their attention was always drawn to him. It was pitiable that their existence could only be substantiated by his suffering. The class murmured with excitement at the last day, only slightly quieting down once their homeroom teacher entered the class. "All right, class, settle down." A voice called over the room, the excited conversation ending quickly among with students as a nearly 40-year-old teacher took the podium in front of the room. In his hands were a stack of papers, eyes holding a serious look as his voice entered the ears of every student. "As you know, this is your last day. Despite this, that doesn't mean you're off scot-free. Now it's time to complete your career aptitude test." "What?" On the last day, the grievances of the students were expressed in the long groans or dissatisfied grunts. That disappointment did not last long. Throwing the papers into the air, the teacher's face split with a large smile. Who am I kidding? You all want to be heroes, right?" The students acted upon this, their voices cheering, their quirks activating as they wholeheartedly agreed. All of them wanted to be a hero. Even Izuku at one point wanted the same thing until he learned who would also be a part of them. The cheers that rang out were interrupted, a large explosion sounding through the classroom. Two children climbed their desks, both sporting spiky, ash-blonde colored hair and a pair of red eyes. Large smirks written across their faces as the boy of the twin siblings spoke up. "Hey teach, don't lump us in with those Fing extras. Yeah. These 𝐴𝐻𝗱𝗟s wouldn't even make it as a sidekick at some D-list hero agency." The boy's sister shouted in support, their hands popping with explosions as their red eyes glared at the teacher, their rough gazes sweeping over the class as many raised their voice in protest. "Hey!" The teacher, looking to the file placed on the podium, flipped through a few pages before looking up at the 5 students. The names, Katsuki and Katsumi Baku, the aforementioned loud ash blondes. Shoto and Shoka Todoroki, son and daughter of the number 2 hero Endeavor. Both had dual-colored hair, white and red. Their eyes a different color, one blue and one gray. If they had both been born the same gender, the only way anyone could tell the difference would be through the way their hair and eye colors had been swapped in opposite places. Both sisters of the twins grew up excellent. They, along with Izumi, were objects of affection. No matter when or where their figures drew the gazes of boys. Most but not all. He had to fight the disgust from showing on his face each time his eyes glanced in their direction. Appearance-wise they were pleasing, that is unless you see their true faces. Finally Izumi Yagi, the only member of the Yagi twins that had the potential to be not only the best hero, but a hero in general. The legendary daughter of the number 6 hero, Inko Yagi, aka Magnetic, and the number 1 hero, Toshionori Yagi, or as everyone knows him, All Might. She from a young age was carefully trained by top heroes. Her athletic appearance proof of this fact. Everything was handed to her on a gold plate. Coddled and spoiled beyond belief. There was nothing she didn't have. They were people that no one in Aldra or the world would be able to forget. That's right, you 5 all applied to the U. A preparatory school. Amazing, all 5 of you nearly scored perfectly on the mock tests. A murmur of amazement sounded throughout the room. The students that complained at Katsuki's and Katsumi's words quieted down, shrinking back in their seats. Of course the dream was to enter U. And realistically, as long as it was a good prep academy you could get in, but among all of those, the only academy with a direct line into U. Was the academy run by the same college, specifically designed to weed out the top heroes from the bottom. To even apply costed enormous amounts of money, and to be accepted you would need excellent control over your quirk. The class could only accept this. After all, these 5 students were always the top-ranked, especially Izumi Yagi. There was no doubt, everyone said she among all others was special. A powerful quirk, powerful backing, intelligent, a great reputation, and a cheerful personality. No one ever thought she wouldn't amount to anything. She would be the best, she is the best, and she knew it. 100% in the mock exams, straight A's in every class, ace of any physical examination. She was in every sense of the word his complete opposite. This was by no means purely based on her own work. The teachers, especially this one, went out of their way to sabotage his grades, to disqualify, and lower his standing at every opportunity. Even now. Izuku Yagi, it seems you were going to apply to the U. A preparatory school too. It was a single sentence that brought a wave of hostility his way. Still he remained undisturbed. This was all too common of an occurrence for it to have any effect on his emotions. No, his eyes remained planted onto the desk. Deku. UF. Applying for you. I'll kick your butt. Katsuki went to move. Hands already readying an explosion. You a quirkless thing loser wanna go to you? They would never accept someone like you. Before the distance closed entirely, the teacher spoke. Bakugu, I still need to finish class. Please restrain yourself until the bell. The school, although they did not like him, had to retain a certain reputation. The favoritism was apparent. The meaning behind his words not lost on any student, because as soon as the bell had rang they approached him. He could feel them standing at their side, not flinching when a hand slapped itself on his desk, radiating with explosions, singing the wood beneath. You think you're fing tough, huh? Katsuki grabbed Izuku by the collar of his uniform. His face right in Izuku's as he screamed. Those Fing rejects won't be SHT. What makes you a quirkless Fing already think you can do better? Katsuki tossed Izuku to the ground. Give up, Deku. Mom and Dad already have, so who are you trying to be a hero for? You can't do the... Izumi's telekinesis took hold of Izuku, launching the boy into the wall nearest the window. Just lie down. Shoto's arms crossed over his chest. All 5 looking down on Izuku, who peered at them from behind his hair. His fists slowly balling. He hated this. All of this. What gave them any right? Just because they have their quirks, they think they could look down on him like this. Shitty waste of space. Tisk, disgusting. Katsumi and Shoya's words rang in his ear. His body still not moving until Katsuki's next words. Hey Deku, I know how you can get a quirk. Just dive off the roof and pray for one in your next life. He wouldn't wait anymore. From his sitting position he shot up towards Katsuki, his fist connecting with the ash blonde's jaw, knocking his head backward as the boy fell to the ground. In their collective shock, Izumi was next, receiving a kick to the side of her ribs, knocking the wind from her lungs. By his second attack the rest snapped out of their hesitation. Shoto raising his left hand ready to fire off his quirk when he too felt a fist connect with his nose. Crack, the boy reeled in pain, falling over as Izuku continued to wail on his. Todoroki raised his arms in defense as Izuku's fists continued to fall on his face. Although his initial attack was successful, it did not last long. Another explosion from Katsumi pushed his body shoto, and once on the floor his right leg became entrapped with ice. Shoya's foot planted firmly on the ground as her quirk came in effect. Trapped, Izuku watched the pain of his attacks dissipate and were replaced with anger. Holding her side, Izumi glared down at him. Katsuki and Katsumi too stood at her side, rubbing his chin while Shoya tended to her brother. The three approached him, and once again he suffered from his inability to properly fight back. By the time it ended, the sun had begun to fall. Walking out of the aldra, his body ached, bruises already forming on his arms and face. The blood that came from his mouth tainting his tongue with copper. The day was late and he did not want to return home. His absence wouldn't be noticed by a single soul. As such he walked, the sun falling more and more as he entered a shopping district. With his head down and eyes looking at the concrete, it was only by the smell of smoke that his attention turned. A large crowd formed a blockade, not allowing him to see past and to the cause of the destruction. All he could hear was the murmurs of the civilians as they questioned the situation. Pushing his way to the front, Izuku spotted the issue. Captured within a villain was 𝐀𝐮𝐫𝐲, the boy slowly suffocating as the nearby heroes pulled Katsumi and Izumi away. Apparently the group had separated from the Todoroki twins on the way here. Staring at Katsuki's struggle, Izuku's feet shifted, something called deep within him. He would never forgive Katsuki or any of his bullies, but to let someone die right in front of him. How would he be any better than them? The question pushed Izuku to step forward, only to stop as Izumi broke free from the hero restricting her. Her backpack flying through the air and accurately hitting the sludge villain in the eye. He watched her struggle, grabbing onto Katsuki's arm as she desperately tugged at the villain, trying to pry Katsuki loose. The sludge villain retaliated, aiming Katsuki's free hand, forcing the boy to use his quirk. The large explosion covered the area in a plume of smoke. The civilians gasped in horror, unsure of what happened to Izumi, only for their faces to fill with joy. Standing in front of Izumi, their father had taken the explosion, held on, his fist raising while the other grabbed onto Katsuki. Detroit smash. The wind pressure behind his attack snuffed every flame, a torrent of wind shooting upward as the clouds above began to change. It was only after the whirlwind died that the sky began to rain. Everyone witnessing it were astonished. The fact All Might was powerful enough to change the weather amazed them to no end. Yet why did he feel like he was robbed? He was about to do something, anything, but yet again he was a step behind. His stoic expression cracked into a visage of rage, one that kept growing as his father jumped into defense of his daughter's action. As the situation de-escalated and villain placed under arrest, it was only through a whim that followed after Izumi while she was taken to a nearby alley with their father. Their walk took several minutes, and only after they escaped a few blocks down from the scene did they stop near a residential area. Ducking behind a nearby dumpster, he peered over and tuned into their conversation. His father's defeated and injured form was nothing new. An accident a few years back had weakened the number one here. Izumi, what you did nearly scared the life out of me. You are my only daughter and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. His words caused Izumi's head to fall, her mouth opening as she spit out a silent apology, all before Toshionori placed a hand on her shoulder. But with that being said, you made me extremely proud. You ran in despite the danger to save your friend and to fix a mistake I had made. That is only something a hero could do. I've never told anyone this. Not even your mother knows the full story, but my quirk was one that was passed on to me by my own sister. She told me that one day, someone with the heart of a hero would make their way to me, and if and only if they proved their worth, that I should pass my quirk on to them. Dad, you're not saying? Holding out his hand, Toshionori spoke, a bright star shining in his fist. My quirk is call one for all, and I want you, Izumi, to be the 9th user, my successor. Izuku's hands fell to his face, the tears coming from his eyes dripping onto the floor below. The promise he had made meant nothing. Not to the man who made him promise in the first place. His father all this time had the ability to give him the one thing he wanted. Yet again. Izumi. Tears. Everything and more. Trampled on, humiliated, treated as some. Just because he wasn't born like them. Ostracized and looked down on. He was not going to be their inferior. Not Izumi. Not Katsuki or Katsumi. Not shoto or shoya. And not all might or magnetic. Izuku's eyes morphed, his Sharingan in full bloom as it spun, his two tomos splitting into three. The tears in his eyes turning red, eyes bleeding as they spun and took another shape. The middle of each tomo opening, their tails elongating before connecting together in a circle. His eyes stung, quickly going bloodshot. He didn't want to be here, and his Sharingan responded to this wish. His strength leaving his body as the air around him rippled, body distorting in a swirl as he vanished into thin air. It was in an instant he was no longer in that sunlit alleyway. The floor beneath him cold, the surroundings shrouded in darkness. His hands fell, head rising to look at what was before him. A large red door and on it a symbol. A half-sliced fan. The smile that threatened to split her face only grew. Tears spilling from her eyes and down her cheeks as she stared at her father. Her head dropping, allowing her tears still spill on the floor below her. That however was stopped once her father's frail arms wrapped themselves around her body. She responded instantly, her hands grasping at his shirt. "Thank you, thank you." She thanked Toshionori repeatedly. In her hands was going to be the most powerful quirk in existence. The only thing that made this better was Toshionori's next words, his hand gently patting her head. "You deserve it, Izumi. You are a hero." Letting go of Toshionori's shirt, Izumi tried desperately to wipe the tears on her face. "I'll accept your quirk." Her clenched fists pumped into the air. Toshionori, seeing his daughter's cute display, laughed loudly. "That's my girl, I knew you would respond that way. There is some stuff we have to do." Grabbing Izumi's arm, the man examined it. "We've been doing regular strength training for your quirk already, but before you can accept OFA we are going to have to increase the intensity. Are you sure you can handle it?" "I can." Joy spread all throughout her body as Toshionori nodded. "Training will get started tomorrow, but first let's get home and give your mother a diet program. She's gonna have her work cut out for her, that's for sure." Leading Izumi, the pair walked home. All the while Izumi rambled on and on, asking a multitude of questions that Toshionori answered. It continued as the sun fell even further and when their home came into view. Pushing past the black iron rod gate and through the front door of the home, the pair were ambushed by a hug. Inko having got off her shift just an hour ago, the woman eagerly awaited her daughter and husband. The joy on her face quickly overrode with anger as a wooden spoon floated from the kitchen and into her right hand. "I'm so glad you're safe, Izumi. But what were you thinking?" The wooden spoon connected with the top of Izumi's head, knocking the girl down to her knees as she covered her head. "And you, Toshinori Yagi? That was a villain you were chasing, wasn't it?" Her spoon hit her other target. Forcing the father-daughter duo to kneel, Inko loomed over them. Hands on her hips. "Biba mom. Tiad kaken, I had to do something." Her voice got lower, refusing to look at Inko's piercing emerald eyes. Eventually the woman's expression collapsed with a sigh. "Geez, that boy. Why is that when you're with him you always seem to end up in some sort of trouble?" Inko's left hand pressing against her face, knowing Mitsuki, Katsuki already got enough punishment. "It never ends with you kids, I swear." Inko's frustration stemmed from elsewhere, her head shaking. "What happened?" Toshinori, standing, looked throughout the living room trying to spot his son. "I got a call from Rei. Apparently Izuku got into a fight with Shoto and broke his nose." "That child." Inko shook her head. She didn't know what happened to him. When he was young, Izuku was always a bright and well-behaved child. After the quirk appointment, it was like a 𝐬𝐶 had flipped. Always making Izumi cry, failing his classes, causing problems all throughout the house. At least Izumi was always honest with her. "When he gets home." Inko's grip tightened on the spoon. "Well, we can just wait down here." Tiptoeing around the angry woman, Toshinori looked towards the kitchen. "I have some news to share, Inko." "What is it?" Toshinori smiled, glancing at Izumi. "I've decided that Izumi will inherit my quirk." The bombshell dropped and Inko's eyes lit up. Despite what her slim body would suggested, the woman hefted Izumi off the ground, grabbing her into a tight hug as she shed a few tears. "That's great, Izumi." She placed a kiss on her daughter's forehead. The 14-year-old girl blushing in embarrassment. "Yeah, so we have to get Izumi ready for training. I already have a meal plan in mind and I was hoping you can coach Izumi in cooking it for herself." "How could I say no to that?" Inko's eyes sparkled as she dragged Izumi and Toshionori to the kitchen, forcing them to help her prepare the dishes. Every member held a permanent smile on their face. His bloody tears dripped off his cheeks on the floor below. Eyes glued to the door in front of him. There was no recognition in the symbol he saw, yet something called him to it. Head turning, he looked at his surroundings, unsure how he even got here in the first place and where even a potential exit may be. The surroundings were covered in a darkness that felt as if he would get lost even just taking a step into it. Head whipping back around to the door, he threw the backpack he wore off and using the sleeves of his destroyed uniform, he wiped the BLD from his eyes. Slowly he rose on unsteady feet, his body sapped of strength and eyes throbbing in pain. He blinked, a small blur in the corner of his vision remaining despite his attempts to clear it. Putting this in the back of his mind, he staggered forward, fatigue climbing with each subsequent step. Reaching the door, he placed his hands on near the gap. Pushing with all his strength, he failed in making it even slightly budge. For minutes he tried, suching how he moved, pushing with his shoulder, running into it, all attempts failed. Breathing and out of breath, he tried to think on what to do next. Absent-mindedly, he wiped a few remaining drops of BLD with his right hand, smearing the crimson liquid on his skin. Despite the futility of his past attempts, Izuku kept pushing. His hands once again firmly placed against the door, he pushed. The BLD on his right hand smearing the wood. Torches on the side of the door lit up with lively flames, illuminating the area around Izuku. There was no sound as he pushed. This time the seemingly locked door swung open on his attempt, sending the boy to the floor face first. Gritting his teeth in pain, he pushed himself up and back onto his feet. Looking back as the door once again closed behind him. With no clue what he'd done differently, he surveyed the area. Unlike the darkened cave area, the room inside was lit brightly. Izuku's feet stopped, eyes open in shock at what he saw. A large open chamber with walls covered in shelves, all filled to the brim with scrolls. Each wall featured at least 5 doors that led to unknown areas. A lump found itself in Izuku's throat as he stepped forward. His entire body tense, momentarily forgetting his fatigue, while his fists curled. The area was clean, too clean. There were no remnants of dust to be seen. People had to be living here. Anything else wouldn't make sense. Who visits an unknown cave and cleans it? That stupid rhetorical question, of course, went without answer. Izuku trudged forward and deeper into the chamber, eyes fixated on the throne that sat at the room's head. When he reached the middle of the room, he waited. 5 minutes, and then someone, if anyone was here, they would have made themselves known. However, this never happened. Izuku's body relaxed, and although his curiosity peaked when he gazed at the walls adorned with the same symbol as the door and the countless scrolls, he had to make sure he really was in the clear. By instinct, he gravitated to the first door on his left side. By every stretch of the imagination, it was just a regular oak wooden door. Still, if the main one had told him anything, this might not be true. Expecting it to not budge like the other, Izuku was surprised when the doorknob twisted. With a single push, the door allowed him to peek inside. The chamber in and of itself was surprising, but this was entirely different. Again, shelves composed the entire room. The contents, however, differed greatly. Floating in jars of liquid were pairs of eyes. The sight would have revolted Izuku, but his expression steeled itself as he walked in further. The familiarity he felt when he looked was foreign. Inching his way to the closest jar, he looked at its pattern. Iris pitch black, a red 6-pointed star, that decreased to 3 in the middle. It was very much like his own eyes. His reflection being shown in the glass, his Manjikyu Sharingan activated, his pattern was drastically different, but there was no doubt in his mind, these were the same eyes. Turning them off, he looked at the shelves lined with these jars. What is this place? He stepped out, systematically checking each and every room. 4 training rooms, a bathroom, a single bedroom, an armory, a storage, and that room holding the eyes. Not a single living soul was in any room. The day's events catching up to Izuku led him to enter the bedroom. Falling onto the bed, he fell into a deep slumber. 00 p.m. Dinner was long finished. Inko, Izumi, and Toshionori sat at the dining table. I looking to the front door, still waiting for Izuku to return home. Inko's knee bounced as she glanced at the door and the time displayed on her phone. The anger written on her face had been replaced with anxiety. Izumi, are you sure your brother isn't in his room? Inko's eyes drifted to her daughter, who unlike the rest of the family didn't bother glancing at the door. Yes, Mom, he's not there, I checked twice. Relax, honey, I'm sure he'll be back soon. Toshionori nervously tried to assure his wife. Though even he himself wasn't sure of what he said. Was this a habit of Izuku's? Coming home late? Did he do this often? Shouldn't he remember if his son did have these traits? Toshionori tried to comb through his mind for the answers, only to find that he had none for the questions he asked himself. Toshi. Inko herself had the same problem. She should know the habits of her children like the back of her hand. She knew Izumi's like it was second nature. Izumi's favorite food, katsudon. Her bedtime, 10:30 p.m. Allergies? None. So why couldn't she think of Izuku's? When was the last time she even saw him at the dinner table? Or when she spoke to him without yelling? Inko's chest started closing in on itself, tears beginning to leak from her eyes. Her breathing growing rapid as panic built in her body. Where's Izuku? Toshionori stood from his chair, rushing to his wife's side, trying to soothe her. Please, Inko. Just calm down. Izuku's a smart boy, I'm sure everything is fine. He spoke through gritted teeth. Izumi, was Izuku at school today? Yeah. Sitting up straight, Izumi hid the click of her tongue, watching as her parents panicked over Izuku. He wasn't worth their attention before, so why now? They should be focused on her. Shaking her head, Izumi spoke. I'll check his room again, he might have snuck in, so he didn't get into trouble. Leaving the dining room table, Izumi left her parents. Quickly rushing up the stairs, she passed Izuku's room and went into her own. Going to her desk, she grabbed a piece of paper, quickly scribbling down what seemed to be a letter. The handwriting she wrote with was messy in comparison to her actual handwriting. This was to make it all the more authentic for when the time came. With the letter on hand, she left the room and entered Izuku's. She wasn't surprised by the state of the room. Bloodied bandages sat in the corner, Izuku's closet filled with scavenged clothes, walls featuring ripped posters of their parents and uncle, and his frameless mattress that sat alone in the middle of the room. Her face twitched in disgust as she smelt the stale air. Walking to the mattress, she stuffed the now crumpled letter under the pillow. Leaving the room, she got downstairs just in time to hear the hysterical crying of her mother. Toshi, we have to go now. My baby boy is still out there. Perhaps the realization had already hit the woman, the fact she neglected Izuku now staring her dead in the face. Inko, please. Toshionori held his wife in his arms. Even if we go out now, it'll only be the two of us searching. Izuku will come back. If he's not back by morning, then we'll call the others to help. Gran Torino, Aizawa, all of them okay. If you go out now, there's no guarantee that you'll find him. Inko continued to cry into Toshionori's shirt. What kind of a mother am I? How could she just not know her only son, not know where he was at all times? Okay. She choked between sobs as Toshionori lifted her from her seat. Come on, let's get to bed. Toshionori fought back his own anguish, his attention focused on Inko. Izumi, if you hear anything during the night, get us immediately. He gave one simple demand. Izumi nodded as she stepped out of the way of her parents. Her fists clenching just out of view. When his eyes opened, Izuku's mind followed just a few steps behind. The vanilla-covered wall of the bedroom he found himself in. His body aching as he rolled over and onto his back. His gaze now directed to the ceiling. It stayed there as his mind recalled everything he had learned of this place yesterday. Although the rooms were empty, he expected to be dragged from this bed late into the night. Fortunately, that event did not happen. He rose from the soft mattress of the bed, groaning at the lack of comfort that came from leaving. Still, he had something to do. Even after searching this entire place, the similarities he shared, the sense of familiarity, he could not make sense of any of it. Entering the chamber, his attention shifted the scrolls placed within the shelves. Looking at the different kanji that had been etched into the sides, he read. Seals. Jutsu. History. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 Taijutsu chakra summons. Most of them were words that were completely unknown. He knew the concept of chakra in Buddhism, but he doubted the one he read meant fully captured what the shelves apparently did. Izuku looked between the shelves. Although everything called to him, the first section he made his way toward was history. If the history involved the meaning of the place he found himself in, then it could be the foundation of all the other shelves of knowledge. Grabbing the first numbered scroll, he unraveled its contents. The first names he read were Kaguya Otsutsuki, Hagoromo Otsutsuki, and Himura Otsutsuki. The scroll delved deep: Kaguya's history, her apparent fall from the heavens, chakra, the 10 tails, 𝐻𝗔𝐿. The more he read, the more his eyes cleared. His 3-tomo Sharingan activated as his eyes scrolled across the words. He learned Indra and Ashura, the Sharingan, Rinnegan, chakra. This history was far different from the one taught in school. It was almost as if this were a different world, but he knew better than to entertain that reality. Eventually, the first scroll came to an end, but there was so much more to read. When he got to the second scroll, he read a single name. Madara Uchiha. Izuku. It was early in the morning when Inko ran from her bedroom, last night's outfit still clothing her. Face stricken with dried tears as she ran towards her son's room. Behind her, Toshionori. The man running with the woman as they crossed the hall. Their beating footsteps rousing a now awake Izumi, who looked out her bedroom door. Inko, once she reached Izuku's door, wasted no time as she threw it open, eyes filled with shock as the area became clear for her to see. A hand went over her gasped mouth. The state of the room was beyond horrible. The stale air almost threatening to choke her. Despite Izuku's best efforts to keep the room clean, it was caked in dust. Walking in further, Inko's tears once again fell, eyes falling to the corner near the bed. Bandages covered in dry blood lay on the floor, closet filled with what looked like dirty rags. Toshi, what have we done? Inko turned, looking at her shocked husband. She watched his fists slowly clench. What did we do to our son? How? He couldn't believe what he was seeing. What caused Izuku to live like? Did he ever take Izuku to get new clothes or a bed? No. Toshionori's hands went to grasp at his hair. What the F did he not do? Izuku was quirkless, yes, but did that really cause him to not look at his own son? Even when he was. Inko fell to the floor holding her face, Toshionori quickly dropping to grab his wife. Inko, we need to call Hound Dog and the others. They can find Izuku. Toshionori left his wife on the floor, turning to run back to his bedroom and grab his phone. With it in hand, he pressed the button to speed dial NG Todoroki. The line picked up after 2 rings. Toshionori-NG. Izuku's gone missing, please. I need you down here. I'm gonna call Nizu and try to get someone from you. Ask you kids if they've seen Izuku. Okay. The line went dead. NG had picked up on the seriousness of Toshionori's words. No momentum was wasted as he made another call. His voice booming over the house as he called Nizu, Gran Torino, Aizawa, Hound Dog, even Night Eye. Rushing back to Izuku's room, Toshionori watched Izumi hug her mom, his daughter shedding tears as she held Inko. Toshionori waited, agonizing as he looked into the room. He didn't want to touch a thing. Doing so could throw off Hound Dog's scent. Minutes passed until the heroes gathered. Mitsuki Bakugo, having overheard from Rei Todoroki, brought her twins, as did Endeavor with his own children. In the living room, Toshionori and Inko desperately tried to explain the situation. In this time, Izumi's eyes were drawn towards her friends. With a shake of her head, everything that needed to be said had been told. They weren't responsible. They never hurt Izuku. They protected him from others. Toshionori, you need to calm down. Speaking over the hysterical parents, Gran Torino tapped his cane on the ground, shutting the pair up, with Inko's sniffling still being heard. Take us to his room. Hopefully Hound Dog can catch a scent. At the old hero's words, they were led by the parents into Izuku's room, the state catching them off guard as well. 𝐻𝐮𝐬 looking with narrowed eyes. What the hell is this? Is this really where your son slept? His disbelief was matched with the others. His question was met with a small and painful nod from the parents. Although many wanted to question it, the fact Izuku was missing was more important. Hound Dog walked in the room, telling everyone else to stand back as he searched the room. The best smell would come from Izuku himself, and the most reliable would be the BLD soaked bandaged. Picking up the medical supplies, he sniffed the BLD, trying to find Izuku's scent. As he did, his eyes roamed, eventually spotting something hidden beneath Izuku's pillow. 𝐻𝐮𝐬. The pillow. The underground hero stepped inside, moving towards the mattress before plucking the pillow from its resting place. The crumpled piece of paper was hard to miss. Picking it up, 𝐻𝐮𝐬 read the note to himself, his brow furrowing. Toshionori pleading with the man. 𝐻𝐮𝐬, what does it say? Izuku ran away. The note says that he's been bullied for 10 years. That he couldn't take it because he was quirkless, and so he ran away despite Izumi and his friends protecting him. Izuku was bullied. Inko gazed at the note, her response prompting 𝐻𝐮𝐬 to step towards her. Are you telling me you didn't know about this? How the hell could you not know? Explain what is going on. Why is his room like this? How could you be blind to Izuku's struggles growing up? 𝐻𝐮𝐬 pressed the parents for answers. By now nearly every hero looked in their direction. Neither Toshionori or Inko could come up with a response. Why didn't he tell us? Izumi, was Izuku getting bullied? They turned their heads to their crying daughter, who nodded sadly. The two tried to formulate a reason based off Izumi's confirmation, but the first people to connect the dots were Nizu and 𝐀𝐮𝐿. Before the two parents could speak, an air-propelled kick sent Toshionori to the floor, his jaw swelling with pain. Quirkless. This room. Toshionori. Don't you dare try and lie. Were you neglecting Izuku? Although the old man knew the answer, he wanted them to admit it. Their silence spoke volumes, Toshionori's head dropping. You disgrace. After everything she did for you. What a disappointment. Hound Dog, do you have a scent? Turning his attention away from Toshionori, 𝐀𝐮𝐿 looked to the hero, who nodded. With Hound Dog leading the way, Toshionori, Inko and the heroes left, leaving Izumi and the others to their own devices. Once they heard the door close, Izumi clicked her tongue. Quirkless 𝐵𝐻𝐷. She yelled, turning before she kicked the mattress. Well, what the F do we do now? If they start asking questions, they're gonna know we were that Deku's bullies. Katsumi yelled, looking to Izumi. Hey RED, they aren't that far yet, shut your mouth. Besides, no one is gonna find Katsuki's growled at his sister, popping explosions in his hand. And if they do? Shoto's head turned to the pair, his bandaged nose still aching in pain. Hound Dog is with them, and they found a scent. If they find Deku, what makes you think he won't tell? We'll beat his but before he does SHT. He's too much of a PP to do anything. Shoya's emotionless eyes rolled. Weren't you knocked flat because he punched you? What did you say, you little beach? Shut the F up. Izumi's voice broke over the room. There was no way in hell she was going to lose her father's quirk because of that piece of it. We can't do anything now. We just have to hope they don't find a thing. Izumi hated this uncertainty, her panicked breathing causing the others to become nervous. Luck was on their side, however. The heroes picked up speed. All Might in his hero form ran beside Hound Dog as they entered the alleyway of a residential center. Toshionori paused upon seeing the area, and more so when Hound Dog stopped by a nearby dumpster, his hands pressed down on a dried pool of BLD. The trail ends here. I can't even smell him leaving. Although the words caused Inko to break down further, Toshionori's tipping point was different. Because just a few feet away from the trash can was where he offered Izumi his quirk. He heard it all. His son was quirkless, and he could have given his boy a chance at greatness. His own tears started flowing. His teeth gritted before he turned to the heroes rushing towards 𝐻𝐻𝐿. He pleaded. 𝐻𝐻𝐿, use your quirk on me. Tell me what you see. The number hero hoped that in the near future Izuku would be found, and hopefully the man can right his wrongs. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 nodded, looking all might in his electric blue eyes. His quirk reacting. A few seconds passed before the hero suddenly pushed off Toshionori. Sweat dripping down the composed man's face as his dry heaved. Had Aizawa not supported the man, Night Eye would have collapsed to the ground. Nothing fazed Night Eye, so this reaction was something different. What did you see? Night Eye's pupils shook. In his mind was a devastating image. A long black-haired man stared straight into his very soul, eyes a BLD red with 3 commas connected in a ring. The emotionless face as if the person he faced was nothing, the hatred and bitterness behind his pupils shaking his bones. Did you see Izuku? Inko stepped closer, only stopping in her approach once Night Eye's arm shot out. I don't know what I saw. A man, black hair, red eyes. Toshionori whoever it was. Don't face him. Night Eye couldn't stress the situation enough. The man looking back down at the floor shaking his head. The fear that coursed through his body making the other pros stand on edge. With Izuku's trail dead and the truth behind the Yagi parents revealed, there was only one question in anyone's mind. What the hell was happening? A rich history. Lost to time. He the only inheritor of this knowledge and of the Uchiha clan. What he possessed was far beyond the limitations of a quirk. It was a rare moment, a small smirk crawling onto Izuku's face. His life was dictated by quirks. What he could and couldn't do determined by whether or not he had one or not. Chakra, jutsus, the Sharingan, the Rinnegan, only things he could use and exploit. No longer would he be the one humiliated and trampled upon. He was the last of the Uchiha clan. He would gain the power his ancestors had, Sasuke, Itachi, Obito. He was Madara's physical copy. But he wouldn't limit himself to just what Madara had done. The age of the shinobi was over. He will be a hero that everyone told him he couldn't be. He would no longer cower, nor would he hide his potential. He would excel, he would dominate. To get started he moved, reaching the shelf filled with chakra scrolls. Picking up the first he read quickly, his Sharingan burning the information into his head. He copied the instructions, body sitting in a lotus position and his eyes closing, concentrating while his hands formed the jutsu symbol for Ram. It wasn't until he sat for a couple of minutes that he was able to pull himself into his own body. His eyes opened, Izuku found himself standing in a large abyss. The chakra scroll had explained what this area was. It was the manifestation of his internal body that housed his chakra. His naked form moved towards a large pool of a dark blue liquid. This was his pool of chakra, and unknowingly, despite it not being fully unlocked, he had been using and growing his pool of chakra for years through the Sharingan's use. It was both beneficial and detrimental. Following the instructions written in the scroll, he dipped his hands into the chakra's liquid form. Hands grasping at the chakra, surprisingly finding a hold on it. He tugged with all his strength. The liquid squirmed in his hands, its weight too heavy for most people to pull. Yet he didn't stop. He pulled, slowly stepping back as the liquid stretched beyond the pool. It took another tug for all the liquid to worm its way out, knocking Izuku out of his internal world. Opening his eyes, he saw that when he pulled out his chakra, it had exploded outwards before it rapidly calmed and settled into his body. As expected, his exhaustion was amplified from the process. But resting now wasn't an option. He had for maybe 5 years. He needed to learn everything he could. Everything here, every piece of knowledge, the Uchiha clan, it all belonged to him. It wasn't long before he started calling this cave home. The vanilla-colored walls of his bedroom came into his slightly blurred view that no amount of blinking could cure. The burden of the Mangekyo Sharingan was beginning to take effect. Soon in the near future a transplant would be needed, though this carried risks. He wasn't adverse to the danger. A shadow clone could effectively do the procedure, but he hadn't the time to perform this. It took 2 years to even read half of every scroll in the main chamber and 2 more to finish the entire library. That included implementing the techniques learned, to mstr the contents of each piece of information. Although shadow clones sped up the process, even they had their weaknesses. The increase of strength or any physical attributes remained fixed on that singular shadow clone. They were perfect for theory and practice, but the limits were clear. A sigh came from his mouth as he sat up in bed, his disrobed body in full view. Gone was his skinny and self-trained stature. Arms, torso, abdomen, legs, Every section of his body were covered in lean-toned muscle refined by taijutsu. Face, sharp and free of body fat. His hair had grown, the black spiky hair of his youth falling to the waist. His stature confidently sitting at 5 feet 11 inches, he supposed that was something to thank Toshionori for. Compared to the past, his growth was far beyond any expectation. However, his delayed but free growth PRD was rapidly ending. Looking to the bedside counter, his squinting eyes discerned the time, 3:30 a.m. The digital clock looked slightly out of place among the furniture. This cave was a place of isolation, but that didn't mean he limited himself to these walls. Being 3 hours away from Uchiha disallowed for any chance meetings with his family. A visit to the pawnshop with rare, even maybe completely record-wiped pieces of gold solved all monetary issues. Rising from his bed, he lightly stretched, bones clicking before he strode to the wardrobe. Inside were a variety of outfits, some old and used by his ancestors. The others were bought on his outings. He outfitted himself with a plain, form-fitting black t-shirt, gray sweatpants, and a pair of black track shoes. It was not his preferred style of dress. Although outdated, the clothes of the shinobi were lightly armored and comfortable. However, in saying that, even he could recognize that in the current era of quirks, a civilian and a student wearing such clothes could be odd. He dressed the part, but even then he was sure stares would be directed towards him. The exposed skin he showed were covered in scars, some from the past, most from training. Sparring against yourself day in and day out, trying to kill each other, tended to lead to extremely long and bloody fights. Having finished dressing, he grabbed one of the last remaining sealed food scrolls. Typically they were field rations. He had grown accustomed to such bland and tasteless food, so the thought of eating it did not unnerve him in the slightest. Exiting the bedroom and entering the main chamber, he could hear the training rooms bustle with life. Each day, from dawn until dusk, he had his shadow clones constantly practicing, and like always he stood, the chakra signature in each room popping from existence as his mind became burdened with their information. A light pinch in his brain with only a second of fading pain. As soon as the old clones snapped from existence, more were created, building off what the previous ones learned. Several small puffs of smoke and standing at his side were exact copies. Their roles were simple, and without an order they returned to the training rooms. Overseeing their training would be impossible, time was ticking down and he had to be at U. The entrance exam was in just a few short hours. When the gates of U came into sight was he amazed. It was nothing against the school, it was marvelous, a modern piece of history where most of the best and brightest heroes came from. However, this was just another step. To prove his name to the Uchiha, to discredit the doubts his former family held towards him. A promise made only to himself, he would be better than all of them. Better than his sister and her friends, better than his parents, and even greater than his ancestors. There was no hesitation in his stride, even through his blurred vision he gazed at the passing by students. All were dressed in school uniforms, making him the odd one out among all the participants. His lack of a uniform came from the fact that his formal education ended after 8th grade, though that did little to hinder his learning. Along with the scrolls of the Uchiha, he brushed up on politics, math, science, language, all through a shadow clone's visit to the local libraries of Hiroshima. He was confident in his intelligence. He would make what he knew carry him through the written exam, if not he would find his own way. Reaching the top of the stairs drew the gazes of many. Among them, none seemed exceptional at a glance, but before Izuku could focus on scouting the competition, he saw them. His jaw clenched at the sight of her sister and her 2 female companions. Izumi's green blonde hair swaying in the wind as she accelerated rapidly to catch a falling chestnut brown-haired girl. In the years he was gone, she had grown well, body exceptionally toned. He truly knew now that his disappearance had no effect on her whatsoever, not that he expected it to. Everything was handed to her on a silver platter, but even silver degrades. The cluster of several different chakras swirled in his chest, all in disharmony with the original residing in her stomach. Her pathways restricted and twisted in horrible disfiguration. 7 of the 8 chakras in her chest pushed away from Izumi's core. Whatever quirk that was given to her was quick to reject. However, the girl managed to forcefully subjugate a small fraction. He guessed he should at the very least acknowledge that. His jaw loosened, face falling into a stoic disposition. A reunion was always going to happen, it was inevitable. Should he turn tail? No, he won't hide from her, his strength was greater. It was she who would be humiliated. The resentment and hatred in his chest never faltered. A small leak of killing intent sent the girl's way as he walked by. He could see her reaction plain as day. Her bright smile stiffened and a bead of sweat formed on the base of her neck. Body shocked into paralysis as her bubbly voice died in her throat. Katsumi 𝐴𝐵𝐾𝐽, shoya 𝐵𝐾𝐽 were quick to follow Izumi's condition. A small sense of panic crawling deep into their spines until it was gone. In an instant he stopped, allowing the three girls to catch their breaths in front of one very confused student. Izumi's eyes turned his direction with a rapid turn of her head. He hummed at the shorter sibling. Years of bullying warranted some recognition of its victim. Though Izumi herself doubted her eyes. If it were permissible, he would have fought her then and now. It would be an easy fight, even with limiting his techniques. He doubted the dance between them could have been any more exciting than swatting a fly. He walked, signing into the exam under Izuku Uchiha. He sat in the auditorium. Finally he could discern the abilities of those in the room. A few had promise, not enough to prove enticing, but his head turned. Just a few feet away sat another student, for a moment his gradually blinded vision clearing. Her uniform loose as her foot thumped against the ground loudly impatiently. Her brown-tan skin, white long hair, rabbit ears and tail, along with her clearly defined strong athletic body was unlike many others in the room. He too was a man and she was physically attractive, large BRSS and rear, toned body, clear skin and a fierce look. But her beauty lay more in her combat prowess. She had experience in fighting, looked as if she enjoyed it. He could relate in that aspect. She was different from the mediocre bunch. His interest was piqued. 30 minutes passed before the exam was about to officially begin. Nearly every student found their seats and awaited. The usual useless instruction of regulation and possible reason for early dismissal was announced, and gradually the test packets were handed out. It was easy, perhaps even too easy. 45 minutes of the 3-hour time frame passed, and he was already finished. Was it over-preparation on his part? Most likely. His studies didn't end at college-level introduction subjects but expanded beyond. Regardless of the reason, he closed his eyes, allowing them some rest. The auditorium lights dimmed and a spotlight brightened the stage as Present Mic stood. The large projection screen behind the hero humming to life with a visual of 4 distinct robots. "All right, listeners, can I get yeah?" Hearing nothing but silence, Present Mic's sweat dropped. "Tough crowd. Anyways, now that you have finished the written exam, it's time for the practical. As you saw on the pamphlets we handed out, there are 4 robots. One is worth 1 point, the other 2 and 3, with each one being stronger than the last. 𝐿. Before Present Mic could finish, a tall blue-haired boy raised his hand. Present Mic, seeing his hand raised, called on him. "Yes, examinee 6782, what is your question?" Standing up, the boy asked his question. "Yes, Present Mic, you only mentioned 3 robots. However, on the pamphlet it clearly says that there are 4. If this is an error, it is very poor of a prestigious school such as you to make this mistake in you." Turning, the boy pointed at Izuku. "You've had your eyes closed this entire explanation. Not just that, but you are not in the specified dress code. Where is your school uniform? The boy's loud protest stopped, his voice choking in his own throat. The other students not knowing the reason as the blue-haired boy stumbled on his feet, grasping at his chest. The whole time Izuku didn't utter a word nor open his eyes. Tears appeared under the glasses of the young adult, who fell into his chair face first. His eyelids fluttering, almost asphyxiating into unconsciousness. "Continue." He spoke over the auditorium silence and directly to Present Mic. Izuku's eyes finally opening with a glare at the breathing boy, who was finally able to capture air in his deflated lungs. No doubt it was embarrassing, the students next to him staring. Moving on. To answer the question, the 4th robot is worth 0 points and is more of an obstacle to avoid. Now we will hand out cards with a designated test site where your practical exam will take place. Once you receive your card, you may exit and follow the designated paths corresponding to your letter. After present mic announced that slowly the students were handed papers that had a letter written down. Test site. Reading the paper he received, Izuku stood from his seat, leaving the auditorium like the other students. Following a path to the corresponding bus, he entered and quickly found a seat near 𝐻𝐻 back. His large stature seemingly intimidating just by itself, as many students avoided sitting next to him. The unfortunate soul who became a sacrifice being the same one Izuku had almost caused to faint. The boy sitting up straight, seemingly afraid to glance in his direction. A small grin wormed its way onto Izuku's face. The bus ride was quiet, many anxious students too afraid to speak about the written portion or their upcoming performance in the practical. Fear eroded their minds, yet he was calm, doubtful that anything 𝐻𝐻 could throw would prove to be so detrimental. Had it been something like facing pro heroes, he might understand why people other than him would feel this crushing pain in the chest, but that wasn't happening. Eventually coming to an end, the bus stopped with a slight squeak of the brakes. A glance out the window gave way to a large cement-domed area. A single pair of large reinforced metal doors stood closed. The bus was led out, and among the first at the door was Izuku. Nervousness among the crowd only grew, and among them was the girl Izumi had saved earlier. It was saddening that he could not be in the same test site as his former sister. He would have enjoyed seeing her reaction as he swiftly outdid her performance, though he would have to make do with beating her at a distance. It was also a shame he was not where that rabbit-court girl was. Waiting, Izuku watched the metal doors gently open. All right, little listeners, get ready as the exam is about to start. True to present mixed words, the opening of the door gave way to a small gap that Izuku pushed his body through. Chakra flowed from his body and into his feet, his speed rapidly increasing as he cleared the tunnel. The other students still stuck in their stupor until, "What are you doing? There's no countdown for a fight. Follow that scary kid." The delayed students rushed forward. Izuku paid no mind to any, his hands reaching in front of his body into a two-fingered cross. The completion of the sign causing an eruption of smoke, and as he cleared the tunnel, Izuku was joined by two more shadow clones. More could have been made, and he would have, but such overwhelming domination was boring. He did not want to leave just shadow clones to fight. This thought finished as he came face to face with a three-pointer. The large bulking robot readied its attack, however that was in vain. Before even a single shot could be fired from its shoulder-mounted weapons, Izuku closed the distance, curious as to the standards of which 𝐻𝐻 places on its hardest villain bot. Disappointing. The word echoed in his mind. Without jutsu, without the enhancement of chakra, his foot caved through the metal, the dented plates sparking wildly as the robot's corpse flailed, its oddly placed head stripping off and away from its main body. The shoulder-mounted weapons fired into the air, and soon it fell silent. Turning, he looked at his shadow clones, having his ego. Even the clones shared the same stoic yet deeply disappointed expression. The one-pointer and two-pointer they faced crumpled into heaps. The one-pointer having lost its shield arms with its torso missing its bottom half. The two-pointer didn't fare better. Its scorpion-like tails pierced into its own body with the assistance of the shadow clone. The front three glowing red eyes snuffed out. Limbs spread outward and motionless. He said nothing. Crossing his hands once more, 8 more shadow clones appeared before his back turned. Gather points, help those who you can. With chakra applied on the soles of his feet, he walked up the nearest building. Sitting on the roof's edge, he watched his clones separate and run through the city. The sounds of destruction clear for all. This trivial task was not worth his time. A strange hybrid chimera rat man laughed loudly. His beady black eyes glancing at the monitor filled spectator room with glee. "We've got quite the batch of students this year. 𝐻𝐻's Principal Nizu looked through the room filled with pro-heroes. Heroes such as All Might, Magnetic, and Endeavor making guest appearances. No doubt their attendance was tied to the fact their daughters were also undertaking this challenge. They have powerful quirks, but they lack control and refinement. Knowing how to use their power to its fullest is just as important." Aizawa scrutinized the display of students. Although some proved their capability, Most didn't show the same level of competency. Yes, but that is the entire reason we are here. To refine these gems to brilliance. The best students use a combination of skill, speed, power, and focus to score the most points in the end by the end of their time in you. The students who don't excel in all these fields eventually will. Well, it seems we won't have to work too hard on these two. The staff turned at Izawa's words. Their eyes glued to two students. The first was the rabbit girl. Her ferocity shone through her stretched grin. Her devastating kicks, decapitating, crushing and obliterating every robot in her path. Bring it on if heirs. Despite the harsh language, the tone wasn't arrogant, and more than often her attacks were directed at the robots that were targeting occupied or even struggling students. Her fierce-shaped eyes crossed the battlefield in an obvious search of where she was needed. Her loud voice uplifting the students around her. Her combat was nothing to scoff at either. The attacks were swift, heavy, and some of the pros doubted they could confidently block the strength behind the kicks. Rumi Usajiyama, she's definitely one of the many exceptional students. Ranked third just behind Izumi Yagi, and even then the gap is small. A few more points and she'll be taking the second spot. However, first place. Nisa's voice praised Rumi, but the animal's attention was drawn to the other student Izawa had mentioned. However, not everyone saw the appeal as they stared, midnight questioning the pair's focus on an insignificant student. The R-rated hero's eyes watching the sitting student. He's been sitting there since the start. Did that hunk give up? Give up? I don't think we're seeing the same thing. The screen suched. Rather than focusing on that student, the staff watched the changing city cameras. Everywhere copies of that sitting student ran throughout the city, saving students and destroying robots. A duplication quirk. That's what many thought, some of the staff looking to ectoplasm. However, their curiosity increased as time went on. Lightning, wind, fire, earth, the students' repertoire of fighting styles and attacks were completely varied and powerful. What is that student's name? It was a question that everyone in the room wanted to know. Even the heroes whose mind were focused on their own daughters turned their heads to look. Izuku Uchiha. All of the heroes recognized the first name. Some were even there when the boy was first reported missing. Izuku. The first to run to Nizu's side was Inko, the woman stricken with tears as she looked at the screens. Her son changed. He was so very different from the small boy in her photo albums. His maturity reflected in his face. But how? How was he doing what he did? Why was his last name different? Just what happened over the years he was missing? Quirk. What does it say? The woman hounded onto Nizu. Fear gripped her heart. The worst-case scenario popping into her mind, and undoubtedly her husband's. Not one quirk was this adaptive and featured so many different abilities. On his registration form it's noted as chakra. As for the information surrounding it, there is nothing. Calmly answering, Nizu's eyes scanned the form. Initially, after investigations were launched into Izuku's disappearance, his status of Quirkless was widespread, and after the first year many of the pros suspected him of being dead. After all, the survival statistic of Quirkless individuals was a bleak percentage. It was an unfortunate reality. However, at the behest of Inko and Toshionori, the status of deceased was never finalized, and before their very eyes was the couple's missing son. How? Nizu. Before anyone jumps conclusions, we must operate on the assumption that Izuku's quirk test ran into an error, thus resulting in his status as quirkless. It has happened before. As many know, some powerful quirks may not show signs of manifestation until the body could handle it, and this might be one such case. We will not stop the test on a whim. After everything is concluded, we'll call him and receive an explanation. As such all might and magnetic, I ask that you calm down. Taking control of the situation, the principal calmed the two emotional heroes. His promise sufficiently stopping the rising attention. Though this is an unexpected development. To think a late bloomer would outshine every other student. There was something ironic about that. A man, long black hair. Almost. A paw rested on a large red button. A reason to move from the building's roof did not come for the duration of the exam. Whatever issues that could arise were swiftly taken care of by his shadow clones. None of the bots released in the exam had defeated a single clone. Direct intervention wasn't needed until the faint screaming of other students were heard. Several blocks away from his building, a growing horde of students moved to escape. The attacker didn't take long to recognize. Towering over the mock city, a zero-pointer stood tall. As the behemoth walked forward, the concrete structures in its way crumbled to pieces. Many of the students took the advice of Present Mike and avoided the robot. Although it would be an accomplishment in demolishing the robot, there was little benefit. More than likely he would just end up even more disappointed at the lack of difficulty. Dispelling his shadow clones, he stood ready to depart. "Help please." The scream was clear. Head turning over his shoulder, he spotted the chestnut brown-haired girl trapped beneath a large piece of rubble. Her futile attempts of removing the debris proved unsuccessful. However, fists clenched as he watched the countless students run past her. Uncaring of her potential death, Izuku didn't know anything about her quirk, but what did it matter? She was innocent. She hadn't shown him hostility. Those who passed by, however, were pathetic. His body flickered from existence. A shunshin brought him next to the down girl, who was surprised by his sudden appearance. Her brown eyes quickly turning to him with tears. "Please. I overused my quirk, I can't move." She pleaded, and it was answered. With a single arm he pushed the underside of the largest piece. His other hand creating a single sign as a shadow clone popped into existence. The clone wasted no time. Plucking the girl from the rubble, it turned and ran down the street, its palms glowing green as the cuts and scrapes the girl suffered began to close. Izuku jumped back as the zero-pointer's foot made contact with the floor just near where the girl was trapped. It was a needlessly big target, and, jumping onto its outstretched metallic arm, he dodged its crashing fist that broke apart the asphalt street. Chakra applied to his feet, he once again jumped, gaining distance between him and the robot as his Sharingan activated and morphed. His MS flaring, tears of blood streaked from his eyes, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 going bloodshot. Forming around his body, a light blue ribcage formed from his chakra, a single skeletal arm forming, and in its grip a single unrefined-looking sword. The students watched. The stage 1 Susanu's arm swung in an upward vertical cut. No one knew what to expect, but whatever they had in mind underestimated Izuku. The single swing was swift as if cutting through thin air. The energy of the attack, however, came but a second after. The street sported a large gash. The previously attacking zero-pointer stopped moving, every light in its eyes died. A seam appeared from its legs to the top of its head, superheated, the robot fell apart. Two halves sliding off each other in a combination of molten metal. With MS deactivated, Izuku quickly rid his eyes of blood. The attack wasn't too taxing, having just used the Susanoo for a single cut caused only a small irritation. The resulting decrease in his vision wasn't too severe either. Returning to the group of students and the downed girl, he replaced his clone's job. The healing palm jutsu and his own chakra had the wounds disappear even faster, and soon enough the girl was able to look to him in amazement. She was not the only one. Every student that had fled from the zero-pointer looked at its crashing body and back to him. Fear, admiration, jealousy. The mixture of stares did nothing, nor did the girl's quiet thank you towards him. He saved her this time. Next time there would be no such guarantee. She was weak, bound to be trampled on, either by him or by some other. She'd better get stronger. A loud alarm rang through the area, and with it came an announcement. "Okay, listeners, the practical exam is done. Please wait for our nurse to check your condition before you go, and I will send your results within a week. I would also like to inform Izuku Uchiha that he is needed in the principal's office and will be escorted there." True enough. A's nurse recovery girl showed up soon after, and along with her Shota Aizawa, Eraserhead. The exam was officially over. With its end, however, came an abrupt reunion. "Uchiha, would you please follow me?" A voice cut through the whispered murmurs of awe and unease. There was no shortage of attention already placed onto Izuku. His destruction of the zero-pointer had been burned into the heads of each aspiring hero. What was happening now was just the cherry on top. Standing in front of Izuku was a hero unlike any seen before. This man's appearance widely differed from established heroes. He wasn't physically imposing with his subdued stature, However, the air around him made it clear that approaching with any hostility was not a good idea. His air of authority making it obvious that within you, he had importance. Though this did little to restrain Izuku. His gaze meeting the man's with narrowed eyes, his stoic and indifferent face only matched by his voice. Why should I? The reason was obvious from the announcement. Principal 𝐻𝐻𝐿 wanted to see him, though Izuku was sure it wasn't really the animal who wanted him but his former family. No doubt they had seen his display, they were going to ask questions, none they truly deserved to know the answer to. However, it's not as though he hadn't crafted a lie beforehand. Principal 𝐻𝐻𝐿 would like to discuss the results of your exam among other details. The hero casted a glance. At the gathered students, he and Izuku were both aware of the environment. Others looked at their conversation with speculation, awe, and a hint of fear. However, most of those glances were in Izuku's direction. Stepping to the side, Aizawa gestured for the boy to follow. There was both nothing to gain and nothing to lose in following the hero. Sooner or later this would have happened, an inevitable intersection of past and present. The results this time, however, would most definitely differ. Deku, the quirkless nobody, that version of himself did not exist anymore. He made sure of that. Empty halls echoed with their steps. Neither Izuku nor Aizawa spoke a word to each other. Realistically, there was nothing they could talk about. Having just met, the two spent most of their time analyzing the other. Between the two of them, who would win if they fought at this moment? Uchiha. Me. Their unspoken answers were the same. What Aizawa saw on the monitors was a monster still in development. Just as clones had extreme combat prowess. Their strikes precise and efficient. So imagining the real one did not leave him with pleasant thoughts. The rest of the walk resumed in this silence between them. Izuku could see it in the man's eyes, unease at his presence. Perhaps this stemmed from the hero's inability to grasp his thoughts. However, the older man was anything but a fool. The same could be said for 𝐻𝐻𝐿. Even this small second-hand interaction told Izuku what he needed to know. The principal had sent the most capable martial artist among the teachers and the only hero who could erase his proclaimed quirk, chakra. However, no one truly knew that this quirk did not follow the rules that bind others. The walk ended once A's conference room came into view. Although the circumstances should have called for a private conversation, there were too many parties involved for it to be such a case. Entering the conference room, there was a sight that would put most students in a position of anxiousness. The majority of the staff except for those currently on duty sat in their designated seats with the only available seat sandwiched between Midnight and Aizawa. That seat just so happened to be across from 𝐻𝐻𝐿, who at his side, Endeavor, All Might, and Magnetic sat. Of course, the last two gazed at him with skeptical and tear-filled eyes. Regret evident on their faces. Mouths opening to speak before 𝐻𝐻𝐿 abruptly cut them off. Izuku Uchiha. Or do you prefer Yagi? Taking his seat, the uneasiness of Aizawa spread through the rest of the staff members. Through his blurred vision he stared. I suggest you use Uchiha, Principal 𝐻𝐻𝐿. I am no longer a part of the Yagi household. His tone was flat, devoid of any warmth that some would expect from a family member. Oho. Cutting off the pained voice of Inko, 𝐻𝐻𝐿 stopped her with a wave of his paw, tone light but firm. Well, having seen your previous living conditions, I can wager why that is the case. Isn't that so, Mr. and Mrs. Yagi? Anyways, let's not dwell on your personal matters, there is much more to discuss. His gaze didn't falter, unbothered by 𝐻𝐻𝐿's comments on his past home life. This unnecessary meeting already proving to be an even bigger waste of time. Why have you called me here? Well, firstly I would like to congratulate you on your performance during the entrance exam. Although this is normally not permitted, it was a unanimous decision to have you, first place, put in Class 1A as your class year's representative. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 smiled brightly at Izuku. The boy's performance was by every measure of great importance. Secondly, 4 years is a long time to have been missing, yet during that time your quirk awakened, you got stronger, arguably even more intelligent. Could I ask for the details regarding this? Izuku. Inko's cracked and crying voice broke through the conversation. Why didn't you come home? Why did you leave us like that? Izuku's gaze turned to Inko, then to Toshionori. Their combined looks of pain etched into their eyes did little. Rather, they did nothing. He didn't pity them, not when they were responsible. He ignored her question and instead answered 𝐻𝐿𝐿. 4 years is indeed a long time. His smooth and even voice directed to 𝐻𝐿𝐿 exclusively. I suppose the simplest answer would be that I learned what I needed to survive. My quirk, awakening, and its refinement came from necessity. The details of my whereabouts or what my I am capable of. Well, I can hardly see how that's relevant. A smirk found its way onto his face. Toshionori's fists balled at Izuku, ignoring him and Inko, not from anger, but of recognition that the son in front of them truly no longer saw them as people he could even stand to look at. Very well, I concede on that point. What matters now is that you are here and more importantly 𝐻𝐿𝐿's acceptance of your admission. If you are still unwilling to share your current place of residence, you are free to pick up your uniform the day before instruction starts 2 weeks from now. The calculating animal's eyes gleamed with curiosity. This school year was going to be great. Over time, I expect we'll be able to answer each other in a more open conversation. Should you really not want to speak of personal matters, you are free to go. Standing, Izuku gave a small nod to the principal. Turning with the intent of leaving, he suddenly turned, a sudden presence approaching him from the back. 𝐻𝐿𝐿. Words cut as Izuku's hand gripped Inko's throat, the woman having abandoned her seat rushing to him in a futile attempt to reconnect with her son. His killing intent wafted in the air dangerously, atmosphere growing heavy and suffocating. Heroes stiffening, some remaining in their seats, others freezing halfway to standing, but none were able to move. They were shaking, hesitating as they stared at the scene. Even All Might, a man who has faced the greatest villain to have ever lived, found it hard for his fists to close properly. Wrists shaking uncomfortably. Was it because it was his son? Or because he feared Izuku even more than all for one at the moment? His 𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐿 Sharingan bored holes into the gasping Inko, its intricate pattern swallowing everyone's gaze. What was most concerning was the actions of Aizawa. Erasure activated proved to do nothing. Izuku's eyes still changed. They were sure this was no mutation. Don't you dare try and touch me. His voice pierced like a blade. Grip disappearing as the hero fell to her knees. The woman gasped for breath between her sobs. Izuku's feet still in her eyesight, sapping the strength of her limbs. I look forward to the first day of school. His indifferent tone was the only thing left with the heroes. Once Izuku's killing intent disappeared with the boy, did they finally catch the breath they were holding. 𝐻𝐿𝐿, for still standing, took a small sip of his tea. What an enlightening conversation. Many things had become known at this meeting and much more would unfold soon. Aizawa, good luck. It was a drastic change of pace. The echoing halls he had walked through a week before now filled with the sounds of excited students. Tightly affixed on his body was 𝐻𝐿𝐿's student uniform. Having abandoned the blazer, he adhered to the dress code as much as he wanted to. Dark green breathes, white button-up, and a pair of black shoes. He had to admit it. The quality of 𝐻𝐿𝐿 was definitely an aspect that could not be criticized, at least materialistically. Clean atmosphere, expensive fabric, and the greatest education facilities a student could hope for. It was worthy of its prestige, but this was only to a point. What really mattered was the quality of students. Hopefully, anyone could prove entertaining to fight at the very least. Roaming the halls slowly, it took 5 minutes to reach the large brown door stamped with 1A in bold white letters. The sounds of annoying amounts of yelling could already be heard on the other side of the door before his hand could even grasp the handle. Sliding it open, there was little surprise to be found once the students responsible for the noise came into view. Katsumi and Katsuki Bakugo argued with the blue-haired boy from the entrance exam. Laughing at the display was Izumi Yagi, who sat nearest to Shoto and Shoya Todoroki. His gaze lingered for a second before sweeping over the room, only stopping once more when his eyes landed on the rabbit girl he had seen in the auditorium. Her uniform was unlike the rest of the girls in the class. Like him, she neglected the blazer and tie, the top button of her shirt unbuttoned and her feet on her desk. Fortunately, the girl herself was aware that she wore a skirt and covered everything with a pair of spats underneath. The look of boredom on her face was only interrupted as one of her red eyes glanced in his direction. From his toes to his head, her gaze scrutinized him, face twitching with a small grin before she looked away. His own face matched with a smirk. It hadn't only been her that noticed his arrival, the class turning in his direction. The other students varied in both appearance and quirks, but all of their focus turned onto Izuku. Some gazes more hostile than others as Izumi stood from her seat. "Deku!" She yelled in his direction, eyebrows furrowed. Toshionori and Inko hid nothing from Izumi. She knew who he was the second she looked. Not just her, but the Todoroki and Bakugo twins showed hostility, popping explosions in their palms or glaring at him with a cold gaze. Their attempts at intimidation had been funny in past and were even more entertaining now. On the other hand, the blue-haired boy stiffened in reaction to seeing him, the memory of his embarrassment and fear rooting him in place. Perhaps in some other time the boy wouldn't have hesitated to approach him, but now he dared not to, even after Izuku's impressive display at the entrance exam. Moving through the class, he took his seat, coincidentally near the rabbit girl. It wasn't a bad seat by any means. He fell into silence. The chakra signatures in the room varied in strength and intensity. Aizawa's in the corner was subdued, the teacher waiting for the best opportunity to pop out and surprise everyone. "Hey, it's you." Running to his desk was the brown-haired girl from the entrance exam. Standing in front of Izuku, the girl gave a deep bow. "Ochako Uraraka. I wanted to thank you again for saving that 0-pointer at the entrance exam. It was so cool how you destroyed it." Raising her head with stars deep in her eyes, she made Izuku's achievement known through the class. Everyone's shocked expressions quickly broke into murmurs. He destroyed the 0-pointer. That big butt robot. So manly. Izumi gritted her teeth at this news. How could that worthless Deku not only threaten her mom but also destroy something even she had to avoid? How was he still somehow better than she was? Their reactions weren't any that he was looking for. It truly was no so great of a task. Still, he glanced to his right. This time the rabbit girl did not hide the ecstatic grin stretching on her face, her legs now on the floor with a foot thumping on the ground. Her fierce red eyes looking to him. "So, you're the big shot," she muttered, her words only caught by Izuku. She was like him, searching for a challenge. He was that to her. Whether or not it was mutual was still debatable. Finally, he gave Uraraka a response. "I only did what I should." "What's your na-dash?" Seeking to continue the conversation, everyone in the class quieted by Aizawa's arrival. The hero unzipping himself from his sleep bag, the teacher at the podium spoke with a deep layer of drowsiness. "Glad to see you're all making friends. Now sit down." Clearing his throat, Aizawa pulled a small slip of paper from his hero suit. "Welcome to you. A's Hero Course, Class 1A, I am your homeroom teacher Shota Aizawa." Crumpling the paper, he tossed it to the side. "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. From now on that won't do. Time is a precious resource and rational students will be quick to understand this concept. As such, let's not waste any more time." Aizawa dug into the podium, pulling at 2 stacks of gym uniforms all labeled with a name. "Everyone will take the uniform with your name. If you don't know your name, then I think you should leave. Once you have your appropriate uniform, change, and meet at training field beta. Like I said, time is precious. You all have 10 minutes. If you're late, you will be expelled." At his threat, the students rushed out, Aizawa throwing uniforms as they went. Gathered at the training field, Aizawa stood, stopwatch in hand. 7 minutes. That's better. Clicking the stopwatch off, the hero looked to the gathered students. "Now I know this is the first day and you all expect to sit and waste away listening to an orientation. I don't bother on running my class in this useless way, as a teacher of you. We have liberty in choosing the way our class progresses. As such, we will be doing a quirk assessment test. Although your previous schools only focused on your physical capability, these are elementary in expanding your understanding of your own body." Anxious whispers broke out among the class. "Test. On the first day." Uraraka glanced nervously at her other classmates who showed the same feelings. Others, however, like Katsumi, grinned excited at the opportunity in front of them. Finally, seeing the reactions, Izawa shook his head. You're all excited, but there is something you all forgot about. We are not created equal, that is a fact. To show you this, Izuku Uchiha, you placed first in the entrance exam. Please step up. Izuku stepped forward, catching the ball thrown his way without so much as a glance. I won't ask about your last softball throw rating. Just stay in the circle, anything else goes. Tossing it up in his hand, the weight of the ball was nothing too significant, a P&D at most. His options varied greatly. A Kamui, propel it with a Susanoo jutsu, but his eyes fell to the sidelines. A show of a DMNT physical force would prove the most fitting. It was the only thing most people could understand. His fingers tightened around the ball. He would not bother deceiving them with a genjutsu or a trick. Simply drawing on his chakra, his arm reeling back, muscles tensing, veins pushed against his skin roughly. Izawa watched with his hands on the measuring device. The class watched the floor crack beneath Izuku's foot as he shifted his feet slightly. Izumi and her friends gazed with narrow eyes, others with curiosity, and one with a twitched ear. Arm launching forward, every movement precise and deliberate. The cracked ground broke apart as the ball slipped away from his grip. There was no bombastic shockwave, but the strength was palpable in the heavy air. Gravity seemingly having no effect as flew past what many thought could have been possible. Those who doubted him or did not believe Uraraka's words were shown clear as day why such a feat was only possible to him despite his half-hearted attempt. The softball arced through the air endlessly. The measuring device Izawa held beeping rapidly as the number kept climbing and climbing, surpassing previous records in leaps and bounds. The 20-kilometer field cleared in its entirety and the ball rested outside the fenced area. It came to a stop at 23 kilometers. This is what you should aspire to. Izawa turned the device over, showcasing the number. The class was stunned at the display. Izumi's anger rising, her fists clenching tightly. Still, this did little to discourage them, shock replaced with smiles. The rabbit girl thumping her foot impatiently. We get to use our quirks. That's so cool. This test will be easy. Easy. The teacher nodded at the words of the students. Well, if it's so easy, then how about last place gets expelled? Expelled, but it's the first day, that's not fair. Many of the students shouted similar complaints, but Uraraka's was among the loudest. However, they were cut off by Izuku's voice cutting through their nervous ramblings. Fair. Wake up to reality. Izuku crossed his arms in front of his chest, the expression on his face unchanging. Izawa nodded. Uchiha is right. Villain attacks, natural disasters, no part of this world is fair. However, it's a hero's job to combat that unfairness. If you don't understand this basic concept, then forget about even being a good hero. Going plus ultra would be something you'll never reach. Now, Usajiyama, it's your turn. Finally given a name to label the girl, Izuku watched her take the ball in hand. Her movements fluid, a single underhand toss. She pivoted on her left foot, right leg kicking like a coiled spring. The ball was sent straight like a bullet, cutting through the air with an impossible speed. It easily reaching over 9,000 meters, and it wasn't even half of the girl's full potential. He lingered on the ball's trajectory, eyes shifting to Usajiyama. The girl, catching his gaze, grinned, her left foot thumping against the ground. An act of provocation despite her clearly seeing his display. He smirked. She was getting more and more interesting. To say his class was lacking would be an obvious statement. As the tests continued, the display of their quirks, ability to adapt, or think did not garner any special attention. Only Usajiyama deserved any type of praise he might have. Izumi, despite having 2 quirks, seemed to be unable to even properly control or implement what she was trained with in any effective way. Power without technique was worthless. That sentiment continued as the results displayed. With a press of a button, Izawa, standing near it, spoke. Time to see the results. The holographic screen changed. Names associated with number values made it clear. Look at this screen. At your name, this is where you are starting by the end of you. I expect some of these rankings to change. The leaderboard lit up. Izuku Uchiha Rumi Usajiyama Izumi Yagi Shoto Todoroki. Further down the board in 7th place, Katsuki Bakugo glared at the first name. Turning on his heel, he charged towards Izuku. UF Deku. How the F did you get first place? Explosions radiating from his palms, he burst forward, right hand extending to blow away the Quirkless 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐽. His attack was met with Izuku's own. Raising his foot, he kicked and planted it in the 𝐵𝗫𝗠𝐷's throat, pinning him to the floor. Grabbing onto Izuku's leg, Katsuki's grin faltered as his plan to blow off Izuku's leg never occurred. Aizawa's quirk active, erasing Katsuki's. Nevertheless, Katsuki struggled, flailing embarrassingly, unable to even nudge Izuku's foot in any direction. Pathetic. Taking his foot off, Izuku didn't care for the fruitless retaliation of Katsuki as the boy captured in Aizawa's scarf was unable to move. With the drama over, all attention was drawn back to the leaderboard. Finally, the last place ranking screamed out. No. 𝐻𝐮𝐿 be expelled. I haven't even become a hero yet. I am gonna die a version. Mineta Minoru rolled on the floor, tears streaming from his face. All the girls in Union shivered in disgust. The expulsion was a lie. Aizawa's revelation nearly made the small boy faint. The rest of the class murmured at their distaste for the deception while others like Momo pointed it out. Now I want you all to get changed and head back to class. I have to do something. The class turned ready to walk away, but Izuku had a different plan in mind. Walking close to Rumi's back, he placed his left hand on her shoulder. The girl, feeling it, turned, seeing who it was. She crossed her arms, grin on her face. What? You came looking for a fight? No voice came from Izuku. His MS activated, he glared into Rumi's shaking crimson pupils, the air thick with his killing intent, choking and freezing the other students. Many dropping to the floor with tears spilling from their eyes. The sheer pressure made Rumi's knees buckle, being so close made her body tense. But Rumi's grin didn't falter. If anything, it widened. Her body tensed, instincts screaming at her to run, but she didn't. She wouldn't, despite what everything told her. She would not win this fight. She would die. A monster. If I'm going down, I'm taking this BSD with me. Her kick exploded forward with lethal force. I'll break his jaw at least. No one could realistically dodge an attack this close. But her foot never made contact. Izuku's hand caught her ankle mid-strike, his grip unyielding. Finally, a smile came across his face as he let her leg drop, killing intent vanishing. Leaning in closer to Rumi's face, she didn't move, surprised by his action. Despite having seen her clearly before, he wanted to look at Rumi without the slight blur. He spoke, strong, appealing, and dangerous. I like you. Rumi's face exploded in a crimson blush as she stammered a response. What kind of thing confession is this? It was only then she noticed how close his face was to hers. The heat radiating from his body, stomach churning with his red-eyed gaze. Why did he just have to become her favorite type of man at the moment? When he finally backed away, the breath she held released. Her rapidly beating heart struggling to calm as he walked away. Whisperings came from under the suffocating atmosphere from the other students. I don't think I've ever felt so scared in my life. I thought I was going to die. Izuku turned for one last look at the class and at Rumi. Standing tall despite the shake in her legs, she faced him, hand on her hip and with a grin. He did not miss the tint of red dusting her cheeks. Returning to class, the students per Ida's suggestion introduced themselves, including their quirks. Izuku remained vague of his own, not giving any sort of likes or dislikes. His name and a surface-level description of what he was capable of was all most of them deserved. Rumi, however, couldn't help but steal a few quick glances at him. What happened replaying constantly in her mind. Furious at his overwhelming presence and her inability to properly fight him. Along with the complex bubbling in her chest as his face neared hers. Confidence and arrogance shared a thin line, but Izuku's calmness, strength, they were entirely different things. It was more a fact. The rest of the day carried out as usual. Proper introductions to teachers and subjects. With Aizawa returning briefly to give evaluations to their performances in the quirk assessment, with his usual bluntness. The final bell rang, and as he walked out of the room, his thoughts drifted. Something Someone had proved to be interesting. Twitched and her feet stomped across the halls of U. Loudly. With her fists clenched and a snarl on her blushing face, Rumi caused all passing students to quickly retreat in her presence. Their early morning drowsiness snapping from existence with her muttering curses. That goddamn 𝐴𝐵𝐴𝐴𝐷. He stopped her kick, made her feel afraid, then he calls her appealing. Her reddening cheeks only deepened her vicious and deadly stare. What the hell was wrong with him? Son of a bitch. I'm gonna. She cut herself off with a growl. It was all she could think about when she got back to her apartment yesterday. With her parents and hometown in Hiroshima, there was no one she could reliably talk to. So, she had to go on that day with that stupid F's face in her mind. She even had to abandon all thought of going into the underground fighting ring she frequented. So, overall a shitty day. But no one, not in the underground fight scene, nor the delinquents she fought just a year or two prior, could stop her kick. But, sure, they could. But that always resulted in a few broken ribs and arms. She replayed the scene, his calm stature that although relaxed had no openings, his smirk, and those eyes that looked straight through her. He was an unimaginable figure that she doubted she could beat. She hated him, but he was strong. A vice-like grip that stopped all momentum, the subtle flexing of his body saying that more than what he showed lay underneath, and his look of satisfaction as he let her go. She shook her head, kicking a brick wall. No steel. A mountain, kicking a mountain and trying to destroy it would be the only thing that could replicate what that felt like. If that was only the tip of the iceberg. Her lips curled into another vicious snarl. I'm gonna destroy that 𝐵𝐴𝐴𝐷. How would she? Rumi didn't have an answer, but she would die before she gave up. That was why her pace picked up when she spotted Class 1A's door thrown wide open. She didn't hesitate to step inside loudly. Everyone's eyes were drawn to her, but she disregarded them and searched. There he was, sitting down like it was summer fling break. She stomped over until she raised her foot, smacking it atop his desk. Had she put any real strength, it would have splintered. She didn't mind when her skirt wafted upward a little. Her shorts underneath would cover anything that anyone would see, especially that purple-headed perv. You. Me. Izuku responded with a slight smirk, his eyes opening and looking up to Rumi's. Her growl growing ever fiercer as she reached down and pulled his collar, though his body refused to move. Leaning in close, she yelled, What the F was that yesterday? The who were in the class stiffened, Kaminari, Mina, and in particular Tsu tensed along with some others. They could not forget what happened yesterday. With a look, Izuku had brought them almost into unconsciousness, and after Bakugo rushed to him, they were sure any form of violence would be met with Izuku's own. Surprisingly, nothing happened to Rumi as she glared into his eyes. Both feet planted against the floor with two hands gripping the collar of his uniform. Her face just an inch away from his, noses almost touching. Mina and Toru would have gossiped about the scene, but that was not the time. Bold. I like you even more. Izuku's smirk slightly grew, almost nearing a small smile. Rumi's face darkened, but her growl grew louder to cover it up. Stop saying that. She shook his collar, attempting to rattle Izuku, but all it did was look like a child pulling against an adult. Izuku never moved from his place even as the shaking grew harsher. He only responded in kind with a smirk. The class could only stare, and their stares were joined as the remaining students trickled in. Seeing the attention on them, the pair didn't matter as Rumi continued to press for answers. Her flustered face only gave Izuku a sense of amusement. Eventually, however, everything ended with Aizawa's arrival. If you two are here to flirt, then I suggest another place. Rumi huffed before pushing Izuku back into his seat and stomping over to her own. The rest of the class tried to piece together what happened, and even more so when Izuku's smirking face cut all emotion instantaneously. Every class was to be expected for the next leading generation of heroes. It was nothing to scoff at. However, like most classes, they failed to grab the excitement of the students. As such, after Midnight's swift dismissal and last flirtatious glance thrown at Izuku, much to Rumi's surprising irritation, the class devolved into a loud gathering of gossip. Rumi was no stranger to this either. She, along with most of the other girls in class, talked However, her eyes constantly glanced at him with a glare. She was not the only one. Izumi, out of the 5 glaring members in her group, held the strongest look. Her anger is visibly cartoonish, with the veins of her forehead breaching the skin. Any second as she would explode. He held her gaze in 𝐴𝐿𝐷, and especially now, he would never look away. It was his way of resisting, and now that resistance can take proper form. He had barely noticed his clenching fist. Even if he practiced what the Uchiha taught, he was still tied to his past. He could never forget what they did. Seemingly neither could they, with Katsuki rubbing his throat where Izuku's heel had been him down. The noise in the room continued to grow with each passing minute until the hallway just outside the class was filled with noise. Heavy thudding footsteps echoed outside and caused every student to turn, even making Izumi's glare disappear. There was a loud laugh recognized by everyone in attendance, a laugh that made Izuku's mouth twitch, face making an expression only one other person saw. A deep scowl written on his face as the door opened with a shower of splintered wood. Bursting through the door, All Might stood tall, his large smile shining with the light of the window, hands on his hips and posing wide. On his broad shoulders stood Magnetic, posing herself, one hand and index finger pointed to the sky. She too held her own smile. The class immediately burst into excitement. "We are here," the heroes announced in unison, before All Might extended a hand and Magnetic stepping onto the large hand before being lowered to the floor. Geeking out, the class went wild. "Is that his golden age costume? So manly. Rebirth Magnetic's debut costume. So, it's true. They were teaching this year. Man, that's awesome." In the voices of praise, the 2 heroes continued to smile until All Might put his hands up. "All right, class, now settle down." With a chuckle, the man's eyes swept across the room, landing on his son's indifferent face. Swallowing the saliva in his throat, the hero turned his gaze away. Similarly, Inko had also put her gaze onto Izuku. Even after what he did at the conference, the uncomfortable pressure from his rage and his words didn't change the fact he was their son. So as of now, like Toshionori requested she do, she would stop and pull back. "We know you're all excited for your first heroics class, but please quiet down." Their pleas got the class to stifle their excitement as the pair looked at each other, All Might being the first to speak. "All right then, be prepared, because today we are doing battle training." Magnetic waved a card in the air while the class varied in reaction. Some nervously chatted, others excitedly threw hands in the air. Katsumi and her twin brother grinned widely, and their grins were outmatched by Rumi's, who muttered, "Finally," under her breath. Izuku crossed his arms in front of his chest. The quirk tests the other day did not show him anything other than Rumi's capability. The others of which he wasn't so sure. Regardless, part of him hoped his opponents would provide a good distraction. This battle training. But before you can prove your heroics in this class, you need to look the part. Pointing to a wall, All Might, Magnetic, and the students watched the wall open with several cases marked with their class seat number. These cases contain hero suit ideas that were commissioned and made by UA's own support course from the registration forms submitted by you all before the start of the school year. That's right, and over the year, if anything is damaged or changes are needed, you are free to submit these to the support course as well. Now then, please line up and get your cases. We will be meeting at Training Ground Beta. Listening, each student lined up excited at the possible hero costumes that were inside. The only one who failed to grab a case was Izuku. All Might and Magnetic were close to notice. Inko, reaching her hand out, was stopped with All Might's hand grabbing her wrist. A shake of his head reminded the mother what they planned. "Ahem, young Uchiha, did you not submit a hero case? It's nothing of your concern, number 1. A short answer. The 2 did not deserve an explanation from him. He continued walking with his classmates on their way to the locker rooms. "DMN. This is badass." It was Kaminari's loud voice that echoed within the locker room. With his hero case open, the boy tenderly grabbed the designed black leather jacket of his hero suit. White lightning bolts traveling the sides of his shoulders with 2 small symbols on the collar. He was not the only one admiring their suits as they undressed. Katsuki was smirking as he held a large grenade-shaped gauntlet. Mineta sizing up his diaper. And finally, Kirishima flexing his jaw within his headpiece. The manly boy turned as Izuku took a spot next to him and undressed. They had seen it before, but few people would be able to acknowledge the body of Izuku. Ojiro, among the few, could see that martial arts played an essential foundation within the boy's body structure. It made the tail quirk user itch for a spar. "Yo Uchiha, where's your hero suit?" Despite the tension of the previous day, Uchiha was a classmate, so even if the dude could be a little scary, Kirishima would not shy away from him. His question also draws the curiosity of others. Did he not submit a hero suit? Even if they had only known him for a short while, it seemed a bit out of character for any a student. Instead of responding, Izuku placed his right hand on a small section of his chest. Kirishima coughed as a puff of smoke erupted, and when it cleared, standing in full armor, Izuku sent a look his way. "That was so manly. How did you do that?" "What the F?" Kirishima grasped his head in disbelief. "Did you guys see that?" "Hey, shut up," Mineta yelled from the side. "While you're busy ogling Uchiha, look at what I found." Mineta leaned close into a small hole boring through the locker room wall. "This is a holy grail our seniors left for us. I can almost see in the girls' locker room." While the boy tried to figure out the precise angle to find the paradise, just a small glance away, Ida chopped his hands in the air. "Mineta, that is highly inappropriate. What if the girls were to violate your privacy?" "I'd welcome it. Anyways, while you figure out which way you swing." "Oh, there it is. Finally, I can see Yagi's butt, Yayarose's melons, Ashido's thighs, Usagi dash." There was small breeze that brushed past Mineta before he screamed in pain, his right peeping eye socket now missing an eye. Blood pouring between his fingers while his panicked and searching eyeball was pierced by a large spike protruding from the wall. Above him Izuku stood, Sharingan flaring. "Usagiyama's pride should not be sullied by the likes of you." Mineta only screamed in pain as he convulsed on the floor. The other students, most notably Kaminari, trying to slap the boy. "Dude, what the hell is wrong with you?" Although Mineta was missing an eye, that was far from reality. A small touch of a chakra-infused finger and a powerful genjutsu was placed. Dispelling the genjutsu, life snapped back into Mineta, who quickly crawled on the ground to get away from the wall. "I'll never peep again, I swear." Izuku shook his head before turning to leave the locker room. "Wow. You're so lucky, Usagiyama," Mina pointed out with a half-jealous and half-disgusted face as each girl heard Mineta and Izuku through the speaker Momo had made and sound provided from Jiro. "I didn't ask that effer to do anything. Where the hell does he get off? I would have handled that midget myself." Rumi's blushing face turned from the other girls as she continued putting on her hero suit. The other girls glancing at her. "Girl, it's okay. Uchiha has a soft spot for you." Mina elbowed the girl on the side, which caused Rumi's growl to turn in a new direction. Retreating, the pink-skinned girl got dressed herself. "Soft spot my butt? I don't have to thank him for that, do I?" She was glad Izuku stepped in, otherwise an attempted murder charge would be on her record forever. At least she told herself this was the case. Walking outside, both halves of the class met up. Immediately comments were thrown between class members about their outfits. Izuku looked at Rumi more closely than anyone else. Again he was reminded that she was appealing. More than that, however, Rumi's choice of clothing was perfect for someone like her. Her feet were covered in steel-toed and heeled boots shaped like a rabbit's. Midsection guarded by 2 armored plates, and despite the lack of protection provided with a unitard. It was obvious why. Boasting great power and speed, she needed freedom of movement, and the lack of heavy armor didn't inhibit her speed. Rumi's own gaze caught his appearance. Wearing Madara Uchiha's armor gave the illusion that it weighed more than it did. Whoever crafted this ancient armor knew what they were doing. Seals were implemented, making it more durable and lighter than they were. In truth, even without these seals, it was still extremely hard to scuff. Rumi's scrutinization led from his toes to his head before she promptly walked over, a grin on her face. "Better hope you don't match me. I'll run circles around you." That suit. It looks good on you." By then the compliment was something she was partly used to. Her grin faltering a second before coming back full force, ears flickering slightly. "Bet your butt it does." I make everything look good. Remember this outfit before my foot is shoved into your mouth. I doubt it'll be from that angle. Still, I'll remember it. He smirked and held his gaze steady. Fine. Think that way it'll be more fun when I wipe that smirk off your face. With another fierce grin, Rumi punched her fist into her open palm. A clear show of testing. She would outpace him with her speed and when the time comes bury his head in a wall. Her chest thumped like a beating drum. She was excited and hopeful that he would be the one she fought. In the distance, however, Izumi watched Izuku with clenched fists. Like Rumi, she prayed to whatever god was listening that she matched against Izuku. After years of disappearing, the 𝐵𝐵 had the nerve to show his face. Not just that, but hurting her mom, getting first place in the entrance exam, and most of all that goddamn look. Like he was superior to her in every way. She hated it as a kid, hated it even more now. She was her father's successor, she was born with a quirk, yet she fell short of him. She would show him who really deserved a place as a hero. You all look so cool. Fangirling All Might's voice broke through the conversations of the students. You all look like true heroes in the making. All Might's fist pumped a large smile on his face. At his side, also looking at the students with pride, Magnetic smiled. All right everyone, today in hero training we are going to do a team exercise. Villains versus heroes. Each of you will be given a partner and the teams will be decided by lots. The objective of the heroes is to enter the building and either capture the bomb or the villains using capture tape. The villains will be guarding the bomb and stop the heroes. As I said, teams will be chosen at random. Any questions before we begin? Ida raised his hand, the boy's head looking at his fellow classmates. Being called on, he spoke. Ma'am, is there a reason for the random lots? Great question, Ida. As many of you might know, in the field and especially when an incident occurs, you'll never know what hero you'll have to team up with. As such, you can't get used to working with some heroes, though there are exceptions. The ability to adapt to a situation is essential for being a hero. Satisfied by Magnetic's answer, Ida nodded and lowered his hand. Searching for more questions and seeing none, the teachers carried on, calling each student to draw a lot. With a paper in hand, Izuku waited before the teams were called. Team A Katsumi Bakugo and Izuku Uchiha versus Team E Izumi Yagi and Rumi Usajiyama. Reading the names, the teachers were met with an odd sight. Katsumi growling with explosions coming from her hands. What the F? Why am I with this 𝐵𝐵? Katsumi threw a tantrum that the rest of the class could only watch unfold. Izuku grit his teeth behind a mask of indifference. On the other hand, Rumi sized Izumi up before speaking with a grin. Don't get in my way, Uchiha is mine. Rumi staking her claim caused Izumi to shoot a quick glare before looking at her two opponents. Katsumi she could ignore. Hell, she hoped the blonde didn't blow up Izuku before she got the chance to show him who was finally superior. We'll see, Rabbit. The other students were led away by the hero couple and taken to the viewing room. Of course, not without leaving some instructions with the teams about the capture tape and allowing the villains to enter the building first. Standing outside the building, Izuku closed his eyes, hearing the ranting of Katsumi, the girl spitting every threat under the sun. I swear to Fing God Deku. You screw this up and blow your Fing head off. I'm not like Katsuki. No one is here to save your sorry as dash. You may begin. As soon as the announcement sounded, Izuku's right fist shot to his side and backhanded Katsumi. Nose breaking it with one swift strike, the girl's head reeled back as she grabbed her face with tears. Why we're on the same team, Ari? With one hand extended, Katsumi attempted to use her quirk only for another fist to smack against her jaw, shutting her up. You're unnecessary, I alone am sufficient. He truly didn't need Katsumi on his team, nor did he want her to be. If anything, the girl would be a hindrance. Besides, he threw yet another strike, hitting the hand covering her nose and injuring the appendage even more. Some debt still needed to be paid, either now or later made no difference, but it made it known he wouldn't take these 𝐵𝐵s down lightly. He only hoped those in the observation room got the message. Dropping to the floor in pain, Katsumi held her bleeding nose. Stay down. Walking past his now down teammate, he made his way inside the building. The colorless, gray cement walls did little to alleviate the blur of his surroundings. Instead, it meshed them even more into obscurity. He wouldn't rely on his main sight anyway. His MS flaring to life and his chakra already flowing in his body. It was hard to miss the chakra signatures he found in the building. One impatiently standing in a single room while the others made their way, the only person he looked forward to seeing now. The other was rapidly making their way down the flights of stairs as he made his way up. Intersecting at the third floor, the two chakra signatures belonging to a single body made themselves known. There you are, 𝐴𝐵𝐴. Izumi stood in one of the many hallways, eyes narrowed. Fists clenched tight enough to almost draw blood, her teeth gnashing. Izuku stood returning her glare with his own, looking at Izumi's body. Her physical training could be seen through her green hero suit, but more than that. The chakra she drew kept rejecting her call, moving like molasses to bridge the gap of her pathways. Whatever the quirk one for all was, it was making it clear that it didn't approve of the body it resided in. It was uncooperative, trying to avoid any touch of Izumi's. He had yet to release any killing intent, prove a willingness to fight. His mouth only opened slowly. Move, I have no interest in you. Take this chance and keep it this way. The hallway stretched endlessly as the two stared. Lights buzzing absent-mindedly before the hallway flooded. Izumi's knees buckled and she almost crumpled to the floor. Izuku walked forward, steps echoing until he moved past her. His killing intent to face directly. Only when he passed her did the suffocating air dissipate. Though Izumi had failed in taking the hint, don't ignore me. There was no way she was going to let this quirkless 𝐵𝐴 walk all over her again. She shot to her feet, her body turning, and she used both her quirks at the same time, her body enhanced to its limits as she closed the small gap in an instant. Her head pulsed in pain, a migraine quickly forming as she used her telekinesis to compress her body, causing her muscles to scream in pain. Still, it was all worth it. One for all, even with its small percentage, provided an extra boost. She didn't care if she broke afterward. As of now, only the groveling face of her brother could alleviate her pain. Her right fist pulled back and then launched forward with unbelievable speed. Her target was the back of his head, but she quickly reeled in her own horror. Despite being at a pace that couldn't be dodged by most, Izuku's head tiled, causing the first to miss entirely. Izumi had no formal training in any martial arts. Her father used standard boxing principles, and her mother relied on range. Neither had taught her what to do when an opponent stepped into her guard. Pathetic. His single word echoed in her ears as a knee struck her stomach. Doubling over, one for all switched off like a light and refused to collect in her body once more. Doubling over his knee, Izumi felt a hand press the right side of her face forward. The concrete wall her head contacted cracked. Leaned against the wall, her head ached, and the damage only continued as Izuku planted his foot into her right temple and sent her head deeper. His movements free on any waist. The jagged edges scarping across her head and causing blood to drip into her left eye. Izuku watched, taking his foot back. His hands flew through several hand signs, earth style, bedrock coffin. A section of the adjacent wall flew forward and slammed into Izumi's right, crushing the girl in between the large rocks. She yelled in pain as she attempted to push herself out of the situation. Had it been mercy when Izuku plucked her from her crushing prison? Anything but so. She was weak, undeserving of any mercy. Even still, he would not stoop to a level unbecoming of him. This pitiful excuse for a sister would always remember this. The hallway deafened with 1,000 chirping birds. His right hand filled with lightning, his chidori grew more intense as he poured more chakra. He shot his hand forward. The struggling Izumi stopped moving as the chidori cut into the floor next to her. Her cheek opening with a large gash that poured blood, the floor beneath her now sporting a hole that allowed anyone to see the floor below. Izumi grabbed her cheek with a trembling hand, and Izuku's foot raised, smashing her face into the ground. You're not worth killing. But my mind changes quickly. Her ground his heel. Remember this, Izumi. He turned and the ascent to the floors above took no time at all. The 7th floor featured the only chakra signature ingrained into his memory, Sharingan deactivating as he cut all chakra into his eyes. Stepping inside her saw Rumi waiting, her left foot tapping against the ground. Finally. If that beach took you out first, I was going to beat your butt. I shouldn't have worried at all. The only person either he or Rumi wanted to fight with was at last in each other's view. Rumi crouched low, her hands planting against the floor and her lower body rising into the air. Her feet clenched and she was prepared to rush forward. No tricks, no enhancements. He made it clear, all chakra in his body subsiding, he would not use jutsu or his Sharingan to predict any movement she might make. Nor would he use chakra to enhance his strikes. As of now it was purely combat capability. She was the only one he would lower himself willingly to fight. His right foot slid back, and his body lowered, preparing himself to meet her head-on. Quickly he scanned the environment surrounding them. Like many rooms in the building it was large, however this differed greatly. Stone pillars and several pieces of debris like wooden tables and metal drum barrels. If used as a weapon either side could gain a small advantage, but as of now their focus snapped back to each other. There was a soundless waiting PRD before the two rushed forward. Rumi on all fours crossed the room fast, her body bouncing like a rabbit, her swiftness matched with the intensity of her grin. She was used to fighting. Izuku met her march, pushing off the floor and running forward with his own extreme speed. The two closing the gap in a few seconds. The first to throw an attack was Rumi. Using her legs she pushed with surprising strength, hefting her body into the air, her right leg stiffening as she did a front flip. A leg outstretched and her steel-covered heel aiming for the top of his head. Her attack sliced the air in a graceful arc. Izuku's arms rose to block with his forearms, the attack smashing into his limbs. The floor beneath cracked from the power. His arms stung with a light pain. Nothing broken. He smirked before he pushed her off and back into the air, forcing her back to him. His left foot kicking straight at her spine. Although physically dementi, Rumi was full of surprises. It made Izuku's smirk turn into a smile. Flowing with the momentum, Rumi added her own by kicking downward. She spun faster and soon faced Izuku's kick face first. Even then her grin never failed as she covered her face with her gloved hands. His kick launched her back across the floor. Rolling on her shoulder, she reduced any impact and soon found herself on her feet again with her heels digging through the cement. Jumping forward, she perched herself onto a nearby stone pillar before using the others as launching pads. Her movement zigzagging through the air chaotically as she built speed. Once again she was in front of him. Block this. It was the same form of kick she launched at him after the quirk test. He leaned back his head. Instead of catching it he would dodge, but that was what Rumi wanted, her left foot still on its path to his jaw, her right left the ground and aimed for his stomach, her hands planting themselves on the ground for support. Finally her kick hit. Izuku skid across the floor with the armor of his abdomen taking the blow. He remained unharmed, and dissatisfaction made itself known on his face. Stripping off his armor he sealed the pieces away until all that remained were his shinobi breathes and shirt. One strike. Do it. He pointed to himself as Rumi righted herself from a handstand and back to her feet. I don't regret it. She was not in a position to not take what was offered. She pushed all the strength into her legs and launched at Izuku. Looking at his unguarded body she pivoted on her left and using her right she raised it high into the air above her head. With a devastating axe kick she aimed for the back of head. Her heel crashed with a boom, Izuku's face forward downward, the cement spiderwebbing with cracks groaning in a loud protest before it crashed and sent Izuku into another room a floor below. Joining him Rumi jumped with both feet intending on crushing his back. Though as she fell Izuku placed his hands on the ground rolling out of the way. Hands still planted his foot outstretched and hit Rumi in her nose. I said only one strike. Why won't you just fall already? Reeling back, Rumi's nose bled, droplets hitting the ground before she pressed down on one nostril. Blowing out a glob of BLD on the ground her grin grew. Izuku wiped a small amount of BLD leaking from the side of his lips. His blurred vision partly from his Sharingan and the other part due to Rumi's kick. She was indeed the only person worth anything in you. He laughed, even more. I like you even more. It grew and grew, his respect and admiration. Even if he was superior and she knew it, The fact that unlike any other she still fought. Like me. You're going to love me after this then. Rumi did not become flustered, her mind driven on the fight. She ran at Izuku again on her arms and legs, sliding she intended on breaking his shins. Izuku jumped over her attack, his foot crashing down on her stomach. However, her hands caught his foot and pushed him off with great strength. Don't just keep your eyes on my legs but... Even if she did not know his gradual blindness, it didn't change the fact his attack was blocked. Of course, he could have made it that even if she blocked, she would be sent through the floor, but what was the fun in that? As such, he made no attempt as his back contacted a wall. He only dodged a side kick thrown at his head that gouged the wall clean. Even the rebar support built into the wall bent and snapped off with her left kick. The debris shooting outward like a shotgun blast. Crouched low to the floor, he swept her right leg from under her. Before Rumi could make a move to recover, he punched downward and contacted her jaw. However, she retaliated with her own. Even if she used kicks, Rumi would use everything in her arsenal. Her fist only grazed his cheek, but even then, her foot launched from her laying position and hit Izuku's temple, pushing him off and allowing herself to recover. The fact this was supposed to be a battle trial with a clear objective proved to do little in deterring the two as they continued to fight. Punches and kicks traded between the two. Small gashes appeared on Izuku's face as Rumi's kicks swept past him. Rumi's left cheek swelled red with blood, her white hair being dyed the same crimson color as the two kicked and buried the other in cement. 3 ribs were broken on Rumi's left side. Izuku's right forearm had a slight fracture from her repeated attacks. Their fight continued to drop floor by floor, first Izuku, then Rumi, Izuku, Rumi, all until they reached the first level. If there was one thing that could be said about their fight from either party, it would be one simple thing. This is fun. Fun. Their smiles as they pummeled each other grew with their wounds. The fight only concluded as the two attacked each other one final time. Rumi jumped onto Izuku's head, her thighs pressing onto his neck. Leaning backwards as she applied pressure, trying to rip Izuku's head off his shoulders. However, the boy didn't let her lean back far enough before his hand grabbed her by the throat. He applied his own pressure, choking the girl who responded in kind, tightening her hold. The two attempting to squeeze the life from the other. You're done for. With a struggled and pained gasp of air, Rumi pushed all her power into her legs, threatening to snap his neck. If only that were true. Izuku responded as he stepped forward. Feet kicking against the destruction that littered the floor and to the closest wall. It was a great fight. His grip grew stronger before he punched his arm forward, forcing Rumi to crash into the wall repeatedly until it broke. When her legs loosened, he slammed her onto the floor, choking her until she fell unconscious. Leaning down, he tended to Rumi before himself. The fight was over and was said as much with an announcement within the earpieces that had been provided. The hero team wins. Please remain where you are. The medical team will come and retrieve you. All Might's stutter was not missed. Plucking the earpiece from his and Rumi's ear, he crushed the pair and tossed them aside. His attention back onto Rumi as he placed his hands over her body. His chakra seeping into her body with a radiant green glow. His healing palm jutsu quickly fixed her wounds. The blemishes on her skin quickly healing and closing. With his potent chakra even, her broken ribs were mended. She would be sore, but that was the pain the girl would endure. Even if he hadn't healed her, Rumi would have pulled through and even asked to fight again even with her injuries. Scooping her up, he held her in his arms, supporting her body in a bridal carry. He moved down the hallways and to the outside of the building. Katsumi conscious was being scruted by a medical bot while several others moved past and into the building to retrieve Izumi. He passed by the other medical bots who attempted to stop him. Unlike Rumi, he hadn't treated himself with his chakra just yet. He wouldn't treat himself. He would keep the gouges of Rumi's kicks as a reminder that she was indeed the best he had faced as an equal, even with his self-imposed restrictions. He would especially keep the straight gouge of flesh from the middle of his right cheek to his jaw unhealed until it scabbed and became a permanent scar. This much is only right for you. Unyielding. Perfect. He continued to carry Rumi until the viewing room came into view. During this walk, just before he reached the door having regained consciousness, Rumi's first instinct after seeing herself being carried was to punch his throat. He stepped back with a single struggled cough. Rumi struggling to free herself from his arms which refused to drop her as he staggered slightly. 𝐶𝐵𝐶𝐷. You win and think you can carry me like that? Wait, did you? She checked her body. Despite the small tears in her costume, she no longer bled, and her cheek was no longer swollen. You can heal people. For F's sake. You goddamn monster. Despite her harsh words, Rumi did throw a look of thanks. Next time, it'll be your butt in my arms. She gave an animalistic grin. I won't let you walk off so easily. Turning away from him, Izuku didn't miss the twitch in her ears as she was the first to enter the viewing room. Following just behind, he looked at All Might and Magnetic. The pair cast a glance at him before their attention turned to a screen that showed Izumi's unconscious body being wheeled out on a stretcher. They shook as they stood, and the other students only stared at the pair. Kirishima's mouth agape as his eyes were glued to the screen. Slowly he turned 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. Amazing! Finishing his though Ojiro eyes were also glued on the screens. Both Rumi and Izuku displayed a fight many would willingly pay all the cash in their wallets. Of course, Izuku's attack on Izumi and Katsumi got anger from some and fear from others. Many more gave the two their admiration. Not to mention that they had just gotten a glimpse of what Izuku could do. Lighting, earth manipulation, healing, his eyes, and from what Ida and Uraraka said, a giant skeleton sword that can cleave a zero-pointer in half. What couldn't he do? Apparently lose a fight. Finally recovering from their shock, Magnetic was the first to speak in a strained voice. 𝐀𝐮𝐿, who was the MVP of the match. Before anyone could raise their hands, it was Izuku who spoke first. Usajiyama is the MVP. She did her job and kept me away from the bomb. Unlike myself or the others, she didn't drag on the fighting and tried to end it early. Although many could argue he was the MVP, his words gave no room for debate and the rest couldn't help but agree. Rumi's tail twitching from his words. She didn't say a word, however, only crossing her arms. With another small smile ghosting her face for a fraction of a second. All Might and Magnetic exchanged glances. This round of battle training was anything but ordinary. Their son was already at a distance that would be near impossible to close, and they could tell he would only grow even more distant from them.